thank all of you for joining us on this sunny afternoon. If any of you happen to be joining this meeting outdoors, I hope that you will like blur your background so we're not jealous, because it's a beautiful day out there. And principal function for today is to receive what we call partner perspectives with regards to budget development, and we'll be hearing from both the universities and the community colleges and the private institutions and other voices from staff and faculty, and so there'll be I think a time of gaining a whole lot of information and input on the components and some of the larger components of the agency budget that we're in the process of developing. Part of that will be what we call the consolidated budget requests from both the universities and the community colleges, which then are part of the source information for the development of our agency budget. Each of the participants will have, according to the agenda, approximately 25 minutes to present. And as members of the F&A committee, I want to encourage us that if you have questions with regards to their presentation, I think our principal role here today is to make sure that we understand the presentation. So I guess I'll encourage us to engage, but to do so principally to ask for clarifying questions that help us to make sure we understand what it is that they're presenting. So hopefully that gives us a little guidance, and we have 3 hours and very important work to gain this information as we build our budget. So again, thank you for being here. Guthrie, can you take the roll, please?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the subcommittee. Thank you. I will now call roll. Greg Heyman.
Here.
Sandy Rowe.
Here.
Emily Simnett.
Present.
Richard Devlin.
Present.
Rukaya Adams. That is roll, Chair. We have a quorum, and I will just note for our attendees, since we have many presenters today, please just note in the chat or send me a text if you have any technical difficulties, and I'll see what I can do. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Guthrie. A consent agenda item. We have to approve the November agenda for our previous meeting. You should have that in the materials. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections, you can entertain those now. Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Move for approval.
Yeah.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
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 Yeah. Thanks so much. The minutes from the November F&A meeting are approved. We'll then move on to our principal item for today, which is partner perspectives. And I believe the first presentation is from the Oregon Council of Presidents. Well, welcome.
Thank you for having me here today, and it's really nice to see everybody. I'm Kelly Ryan, and I'm the president of Eastern Oregon University, and I'm here with Stephanie McCallis. She's a psychology major from Portland State University. I've been president of EOU since July, and I've had a really wonderful year to learn about Oregon and our students' passions and challenges. My last role was in another state, and we were working really hard to reverse declining college-going rates that arose during the pandemic, to increase access, and to empower universities' roles in meeting workforce demands and producing talent. These lessons, and those of the other presidents, who are mostly also new to the state, have impacted the way we see the public universities as well as our role in Oregon. We are dreaming big, and we need more for our students. I'm here today on behalf of Oregon's 7 public universities to talk to you about our consolidated funding request for the 2025-2027 biennium. Next slide. As we consider our funding needs, it's crucial to recognize that our mission and how we carry out that mission has evolved so much in the last 5 years. We're not just educating students, we're creating a community of support for students' mental, academic, and social well-being after several really difficult years in our students' development. We have to meet students where they are, and this can take different forms. But no matter what, our jobs are so much larger than they once were. The reality is, it's time for Oregon as a state to recognize the deep investment needed in this modern day environment of higher education. Our shared long-term vision is to transform Oregon into a national model for public higher education where funding exceeds the national average. This model is one where students understand the proven immense benefits of a university degree and that it is accessible to them and that it is a realistic and achievable goal for both them and their families. By enhancing our public universities, we pave the way for a more modern, diverse workforce and groundbreaking research and innovation that's going to spur economic growth and significantly improve the quality of life for all Oregonians. We're doing incredible work on all of our campuses. However, if Oregon wants a thriving economy, educated workforce, research and innovation, big ideas and big solutions, we're going to have to invest in higher education so we can solve our world and our state's problems. So today, we're asking for your support in that critical first step, our request to the state of Oregon to make a strategic and deliberate commitment to its public universities and our students. Let's move Oregon from the bottom of the tier of the national average in funding per student. Next slide. There are 4 pillars to our investments. The first is access and affordability. We have to ensure that education is within the reach of every potential student, regardless of their economic background. Second, we want to provide wraparound services. These services are critical to provide comprehensive support that address all aspects of student well-being. It's crucial for retention and success in this post-pandemic world of education. Third, we need to bolster academic success. We must enhance academic programs and support services to improve graduation rates and prepare students for future challenges. And fourth, we want to build those workforce connections. We need to equip students with essential career skills, augment academic programs to meet targeted workforce needs, and build strong partnerships with employers to ensure that our graduates are ready to excel and innovate in their careers. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the student populations we serve. In 2021, 1 in 3 resident undergraduate students at public universities were students of color. 1 in 5 students is a first-generation college attendee. 2 in 5 students receive state or federal financial aid. At my own institution, 98% of the entering class receives aid of some form. Over the past decade, the landscape of student needs across all demographics has transformed significantly. It's become more complex, multifaceted, and expensive. We know that the legislature has made targeted investments in university operations and student financial aid in recent years, but these investments have not matched the increased costs of maintaining services and supports for our students, and our state is still behind. So while the legislature can report an increase in support for higher education, the gap of what it costs to provide our services and what the state invests is getting larger and larger. Even with presidents enacting substantial budget cuts, the end result of this situation is that the cost to attend college in Oregon has shifted heavily onto students and their families, disproportionately impacting BIPOC, first generation, and lower and middle income students. And this situation makes attending university outside of Oregon more attractive. Thus, we're shifting our potential workforce and talent out of state. Next slide. One of the most critical investments we can make in improving access and affordability for students is to invest in the wonderful Oregon Opportunity Grant. The Oregon Opportunity Grant is primarily a need-based financial aid for post-secondary students. During the 2021 academic year, nearly 1/3 of resident undergraduate students in Oregon's public universities received these awards. Historically, OOG awards have been based on calculations in the federal FAFSA form. Due to recent changes in FAFSA, the calculation method for awarding the OOG has adjusted to better reflect students' financial needs, making more students eligible for the maximum OOG award. This increases the level of OOG funding required to sustain awards for Oregon students up to the new 8,000 Student Aid Index threshold. Our most recent calculations estimate that the OOG would need to increase by $124 million from the current funding level to maintain awards for students. Without additional funds, the state's going to have to cap awards at a lower threshold, which would take awards away from more than 10,000 currently eligible students, or decrease awards for the neediest. Neither of these options are optimal or acceptable. While I'm happy to share more details on how OOG awards are calculated, I would love for you to hear more from the star of our presentation today, Ms. Stephanie McAllis, about how her academic career has been impacted by the OOG award. Next slide.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Like Dr. Ryan said, my name is Stephanie McAllis, and I'm a current undergraduate student at Portland State University. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my college story. So back up 4 years, I'm 19 years old. I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to go to school and how I'm going to pay for it, because as much as my parents would have loved to support me, they just did not have the means to contribute financially towards my college education. And I looked into PSU and I found out that it was much more affordable than the other schools I was looking at. And I am happy to say that because of programs like the Pell Grant and the Oregon Opportunity Grant, which I have received for the past 4 years, and PSU's tuition-free degree program, which helps cover the gap that the Pell Grant and the Oregon Opportunity Grant leaves behind, because there was still a bill left over after those two grants. It's because of those programs that I am going to be graduating debt-free, which is really exciting. And I also work as a financial aid specialist in the financial aid office. So I'm talking with students all day long about how they're going to afford college, how they're going to pay for their means. And it's programs like the Oregon Opportunity Grant, and not just the Oregon Opportunity Grant, but scholarships through OSAC and programs like the Tribal Student Grant and the Sports Lottery that really help students find a way to pay for their college education, which is so important. I talk to a lot of students all the time, and one of their main concerns when it comes to continuing their college education is funding. Unfortunately, some students have to drop out or have to take a significant break, which can be hard to come back from if they are not given the funding that they need to continue their education. So it's just, I have seen the personal benefit of being a recipient of state funds, which has been huge for me. And I'm just so excited that I get to graduate debt-free, but not everyone, unfortunately, has that opportunity. Next slide, please. In addition to the Oregon Opportunity Grant, the wraparound services and academic success programs at Portland State offers have helped support me in and out of the classroom as I'm learning my degree, and universities across Oregon have stepped up to help support students through what they call wraparound services. So those services are what's shown on the screen in front of you, and are things like housing security, access to childcare, transportation, security, food security. And although these programs might not sound like traditional support programs, they are really important to help students focus on their studies and not get distracted or stressed out by the other things in their life. This is not really funny, but sometimes I'm talking to students on the phone and they're stressed out. They are trying to figure out how they're going to pay their bill and how they're going to continue their terms. And I will literally be talking to them and I can hear their kids in the background yelling for their parents' attention, and the parents distracted. They're saying, hey, can you hold on a second? My kid needs me. And that's just one of the outside concerns that students might have, because we do, at Portland State at least, we have a significant student population of adult learners, which is really exciting and really inspiring. But we do have to take into account that they have other things going on in their life. They're not a traditional student. They might be able to live at home or with parents. A lot of them have kids, a lot of them are married, and they have a mortgage to pay, bills to pay. They have to provide for their family. And so these other programs are really essential in helping them finish their degree. For example, Portland State, at least, we have something called the Gym Sales Subsidy, which is a funding program specifically for students with a dependent, like a child or someone that they're taking care of. And that subsidy helps them pay for childcare, so they're not having to worry about who's going to watch my kid while I'm going to class, because that's a huge stressor and can be a barrier. And there are so many other services. I don't have time to talk about all of them today. Some of the ones that I've benefited from, which has been huge for me, is our advising team. I met with my advisor maybe a month or two ago, and he was helping me figure out how to add a double major and a minor without extending my graduation date, which I'm happy to say he helped me figure it out. So that's really exciting. And I've also benefited from the counseling team. So like the mental health and counseling center that we have at PSU is super great. I have spoken to peers that have also hugely benefited from that. And we have something called a university career center at PSU, which helps students not just with figuring out their career while they're in college, but what are they going to do after? What does it look like to interview? What does it look like to find an internship? How do I craft my resume or my cover letter? And I've definitely gone to them for help for that, and that's been huge. But I also talked to many of my peers who have taken advantage of so many other resources like tutoring, or we have something called the Financial Wellness Center, which helps students budget their finances, not just to pay their tuition bill, but how are they going to pay for groceries? How are they going to pay their rent? Like, budgeting is a huge skill that doesn't necessarily come in your college courses or even in your high school courses. So that's really huge. Like I said, I don't have time to go into all of them, but those are just a few of them that are huge for students, have been huge for me. It's not just about paying the tuition. It's not just about going to classes and getting your assignments done. It's about how do we support students in a holistic way so that they're really set up to get a good education, not just in school, but how are they going to move forward after they graduate and in the decisions that they make. So all of that to say, increasing public university funding is crucial to supporting these programs and services and to meet the needs of current and future students. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Ryan to talk more about university funding.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was great. Next slide. As Stephanie shared, universities are doing so much more to support students, both in and outside of the classroom, than we have in the past. And we have to accelerate the increase in funding for the PUSF to adequately support students like Stephanie holistically. Next slide. The minimum level of investment comes in the form of university-based funding, the amount state resources needed to continue current programs. For the 2025-27 biennium, the university-based funding level for the PUSF funding is estimated at $1,094 million, which reflects a 9.5% rise in operating expenses. You can see the breakdown of the 9.5% increase in the chart on the screen. While universities continue to proactively engage in cost containment measures, which are included in detail within our formal request, there are escalating cost drivers outside of our control. More than 80% of university costs are in people that are for people. Our talented faculty and staff serve students like Seth, and the labor costs include anticipated rate increases for state, healthcare, and retirement benefits, as well as collective bargaining agreements. The remaining 20% is primarily a result of inflation on our supplies, services, and expenses. If state funding falls below the university base funding level, universities face limited choices to manage institutional budgets, and the burden of paying for Oregon's public universities is going to further shift towards students and their families. Next slide. The investments we're requesting chart a path toward making four-year degrees more accessible for all Oregon students, and we appreciate the state's partnership in increasing affordability and student outcomes. But there is still a long path ahead. Oregon continues to underfund its public university, which leads to higher tuition rates for students, and it negatively impacts education programs and services that they're receiving. We stir in constant cycles of budget cuts. And we share the Commission's concern around the share of public universities' costs that are paid for by students and their families. We think about it all the time. And that is why we so precisely work on controlling our expenses. And yet we cannot perform magic. 30 years ago, the state covered 60% of the cost of operating public universities. Now, the state's share is 25%, and students and their families have been left to cover the majority of university operational costs. And college-going rates are declining. Oregon's underinvestment directly impacts Oregon's economic outlook and its opportunities, including its opportunities to build a tax base, and it sets us up to lose talent to neighboring states. This critical first step to reversing this trend is to establish a baseline investment that will more adequately support our students and ensure that Oregon remains competitive with other states. Oregon can and should be a leader. We must set our sights on leading the nation in public higher education. Let's lay the groundwork for a vibrant, diverse economy that uplifts all Oregonians, businesses, and communities throughout the state. But first, we're going to have to catch up with the rest of the country, and the others have a significant head start. Next slide. We're not going to be able to catch up in one budget cycle, but Oregon should commit towards PUSF funding levels that will bring public universities to the national average for state operational funding per full-time equivalent student. As you can see, Oregon is well behind. To reach the national average in the next biennium, the PUSF would need to see a $550 million increase. The size of this number shows you just how far behind Oregon is from even the middle of the path. If we were to reach the national average incrementally over 3 biennia, the PUSF would need to see a $276 million increase in 2025 to 2027. Public universities are requesting this stair-step approach, moving public universities to a PUSF level of $1.28 billion for the 2025 to 2027 biennium so that we can reach that national average in 3 biennia. This will allow the universities not only to keep pace with current operating costs, but also to support increased access and affordability for students, wraparound services, and academic support programs. As we've mentioned, this is a baseline investment to reach the national average. Oregon must aim higher to truly transform higher education for students, employers, and the state. Next slide. Oregon's public universities play a crucial role in driving economic growth and prosperity. We equip students with vital skills, paving the way for successful careers and services to support the state's needs. Nearly 3 decades of reduced investment have put both our institutions and our employers at great risk and need for talent. We know business leaders constantly say they need workers who communicate effectively, think critically, and are adaptable, and that maybe they can function in diverse environments. Public universities are the places where students consistently and reliably acquire those skills and networks to succeed. We know that state, community, and industry leaders understand the need to fill critical workforce challenges. Oregon's public universities are uniquely positioned to expand and diversify key sectors such as teaching, semiconductors, behavioral health, and early childhood education. We're here to support the state. For all these reasons, it's vital that the state increases investments in the PUSF and the OOG. These funds aren't merely financial support, they're catalysts that connect students with high demand careers, ensuring they're well prepared to thrive in and contribute in Oregon's economy. But students need to see that these opportunities are accessible and that they can get there. Next slide. Recognizing the unique position of Oregon's public universities to address these critical workforce shortages, our consolidated funding request includes 3 policy option package requests, 2 of which are focused on workforce connections in critical sectors. These packages are requested in addition to the investments in the PUSF and OOG. First, we're requesting $15 million to bolster Oregon's early care and education workforce through enhanced university degree programs and campus ECE centers. This will allow our universities to help address the critical shortage in accessible, quality childcare and education. Second, we believe that universities have a key role to play in helping address Oregon's behavioral health crisis. With a $17.92 million investment in higher education, behavioral workforce expansion budget will build out, public universities can help to increase the training of behavioral health clinicians across the state. We can address Oregon's shortage of mental health professionals. Finally, we're requesting $9.9 million to sustain the funding for several state-serving programs where ongoing legislative funding intentions are a bit unclear. These programs are listed on the right of the slide. Next slide. The public universities also support Oregon through targeted research, public service, economic development, all of which funded by the state. Oregon has 17 research and public service programs across the state's public universities and a number of key statewide public services programs at Oregon State University, including the Extension Service, Agricultural Experiment Station, and the Forest Research Laboratory. The universities are requesting that the state programs and statewide public service programs be funded at the university-based funding level outlined in our consolidated funding request, just to ensure these programs remain effective and are able to be delivered over time. Next slide. Here you can see a summary of the key university requests for the 2025 to 27 biennium, including $1.275 billion for the PUSF to support our 4 pillars of investment, $432 million for the OOG to improve access to higher education for low-income Oregon students, and the fuel statutory 1% of lottery fund transfers for sports lottery to support student scholarships. More details on this request, of course, can be found in our consolidated funding request. Next slide, last slide. This budget is about more than numbers. It's a roadmap for the future of Oregon. It's people. For too long, Oregon's students, families, businesses, and community have been left behind, while neighboring states have made the moral and economically advantageous decisions to invest in public higher education and the services we provide to the state. We have the opportunity right now to correct our course and ensure Oregon students and families receive the opportunities they so rightly deserve. Oregon should aspire to offer the best 4-year educational experience in the nation, rivaling other states in accessibility, student outcomes, and high-quality programs that equip students with the skills to elevate their social mobility and meet the needs of a modern and diverse economy. To start along this path, we need your support. We need your support for this stair-step approach to at least reach the national average in state university funding, as well as robust support for the OOG. Public higher ed has the power, the transformative power to elevate our society and economy. We can tackle the problems we read about every day in the news. Together, we can turn this vision into a reality and allow Oregon to shine as a beacon of educational excellence and economic innovation. We look forward to answering your questions and working with you to set Oregon on a path to reach this. Thank you.
Stephanie and Kelly, thank you very much for that informative presentation. And just again, I'll just remind us that we want to have opportunity for questions that will help us to clarify your presentation. So I'll call on Commissioner Devlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the President of Eastern Oregon, I share your concern about the level of funding for particularly the university system. But I'm also conscious of many of the commitments that the legislature has made over the last 4 years in areas other than education. And I'm very concerned that the level of those commitments are going to make it very difficult to make the investments in education that are probably necessary to ensure the future of this state. Well, I think it'd be very difficult to fund your proposal in the next legislative session. I do think there's an aspect of it that doesn't really trouble me. That's perhaps too strong of a statement. But you're asking us to come to the national average level of state support. And you're citing, let's see here, 4 Western states other than us and the level of support they have. One of the characteristics they have is, for many of them, is considerably lower tuition. Though even at the level of 276 million additional, there's just still mention of minimal tuition increases. I mean, Nevada, which is at the bottom of your list, just above Oregon. Oregon is really the bottom of the bottom. Its tuition is about $9,300 a year for an incoming freshman. Now, Washington is comparable to Oregon, to be honest, in terms of tuition, particularly for its 2 largest universities. But at the same time, the U of W is now going to be $3,500 less for an incoming freshman than is the U of O. The Cal State system in California, tuition is only about $7,500 for incoming freshmen, although the UC system is comparable to probably the U of O in terms of total tuition. And Idaho, which is at the top of your list, is actually their tuition is, see, I have it here. It's about $8,900. There's no mention in this entire proposal about bringing tuition down, even if you could get to the national average. And I think that's troublesome. It'll be even troublesome for the supporters you may have in the legislature.
Yeah, I would love to be able to respond to that. Is there time? Is that okay?
Yeah, real quickly, yes.
Okay. Yeah. You know, I think that the challenge remains, given those examples, that for every $4 increase in operational costs, the state only gives $1, right? And what this means is it's very hard for us to have really effective cost containment strategies that are not pushed onto the student. You know, there's only so much cost cutting you can do to draw down tuition costs. And the costs that we expend as a university aren't entirely within our control. Dealing with inflation, state healthcare and retirement benefits, the cost of investing in faculty and staff, particularly with collective bargaining agreements, which those states you mentioned don't engage in, not all of them. And so we have significant cost measures here that we have to work with the state on, and we're not able to do it ourselves. We're not entirely able to meet these challenges by cost containment measures, which is more feasible in other states without the same labor and inflationary price issues.
But Mr. Chairman, at the same time, you know, I can remember some years ago, one of the WICHE directors said Oregon had a unique system for students, high cost and low aid. I would hate to end up somewhat similar statement to be a well-funded state system, well-funded by the state, and still be a high-cost system. That would not be a very positive outcome of this effort.
Thank you, Commissioner Devlin. Any other clarifying questions from this presentation? I have one real quick. You had in your request a request for, I believe, about $124 million to the Oregon Opportunity Grant, if I have that right. I just wanted to clarify, as that's a specific number, I believe you have calculated for us to retain funding up to the $8,000 threshold. Is that correct? And is that for all students within Oregon or just for the university students?
That Oregon Opportunity Grant funding was calculated recently using most recent numbers. Now, those numbers can change as we get estimates. This year's FAFSA situation has made it difficult to predict numbers of students. That's our most recent estimate. We can get you more information as we move closer to the end of this FAFSA cycle. We have a lot of we're returning a lot of FAFSA applications right now because it was so difficult to fill out. So it's really hard to be perfect on those numbers there, but I can certainly work with John Martin to get you an answer to that.
The specific is real simple, just asking whether your number was calculated on the basis solely on needs for university students or for all students within the state of Oregon, because Oregon Opportunity Grants are extended to community college and even private. So is that the overall?
I apologize. Cost? Yes, it was for all students.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate that clarification. Mm-hmm. Anything else? Well, good. I want to thank you. This is really a clear, concise presentation. I appreciate it, and I know more now than I did before. So both Stephanie and Kelly, thank you so much.
Grateful for your time.
We'll move on to our next partner presentation. This is from the Oregon Community Colleges and the Community College Association. I believe we have John Wyckoff and Lisa Scari. And is that correct? Are you starting off, John? Or
I am not. Lisa Scari is President Scari is going to kick us off. And
there she is.
Dina Farrell from PCC is also here. And just by way, we also, I believe, have Jeff Schaefer on the line from Clackamas Community College, who once we get into the actual kind of spreadsheet of our CSL model is here to answer any very technical or spreadsheet coding related questions.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Begin.
Well, good afternoon, Committee Chair Heyman and fellow commissioners. As mentioned, I'm Lisa Scari, President of Mount Hood Community College, and also the Chair of the Oregon President's Council. And we are here today and pleased to present our current service level and policy option package. Before we get into details, I want to provide a little context. For those of you that were here 2 years ago, when we came before you, we were in a very different place. Community colleges were confronting the aftermath of the pandemic and the severe disruptions it brought to students, our employees, our institutions, and our communities. Our colleges face the difficult task of balancing the need to adjust to sharp revenue losses while also maintaining a level of capacity that could serve current students and accommodate those students that would be returning as the pandemic subsided. Now, I know we all remember that difficult period when the community college headcount dropped as low as 179,000 students. Now, that said, I'm happy to say we're in a very different place today. Last year, the 2022-23 academic year, our statewide enrollment was up nearly 10%. And for this current academic year, it appears to be on a similar path at most colleges. Now, what has been interesting is how students are coming back. For the 2022 academic 22-23 academic year, we continue to see a declining trend on our FTE enrollment with year-over-year declines. So you may be wondering, how can headcount be growing considerably faster than FTE? And it's because more of our students we have more students attending, but they're taking fewer classes. Now, I'm happy to also say that there is some good news on this front for the current year, as our FTE numbers appear to be growing as well, meaning our students are taking more credits and we're reversing that negative trend. Community colleges have long served a diverse student body, but we're also seeing some changes in the types of students we're serving. Over the last 10 years, the proportion of community college students taking career and technical education courses is up 25%. Since the pandemic, we are also seeing an increase in the number of adults that are seeking short-term credentials and certificates. Yet many are still facing the financial consequences of the pandemic as we see more students with greater need for basic necessities like food and housing. While this has been and remains a historically challenging time for community colleges, it's also where we show up and do our best work, serving the needs of our community. Our combined budget request reflects both the challenges I mentioned, but also the progress, opportunities, and commitment to equity at our colleges. And let me give you just one example. The community colleges have been working for several years now to reform the way traditional developmental education is offered, moving to an evidence-based co-requisite model. Nationally, this reform has shown to drastically increase student success rates for students in all demographics. And I will add, it also lowers the cost to students because they're taking fewer classes. So there's a financial benefit and impact on students. And this is just one example of some of the things we're doing. And community colleges will continue to show up for our communities. And the foundation for us in maintaining affordable access and student success is stable and sufficient funding from the Community College Support Fund. I want to acknowledge that we greatly appreciate the Commissioner's track record of supporting the true needs of our students and colleges in your agency budget. For this coming budget, the 25-27 year or biennial request, the community college's current service level model would require a 14.9% increase to state funding. And I will add that that is without including our current reserve spending. Last biennium, 5.5% of the total operating budgets came from spending down reserves. Through diligent budgeting, tough choices, and additional funding in the last biennial budget, that reliance on reserves dropped 40%. And we now anticipate only 3.4% of the budget will have to come from reserves. But that said, we're still spending reserves to fund the operations we feel meet the needs of our students, our employers, and our communities. Now, I want to be clear that even at the 14.9% increase, many colleges will still be confronting reductions, services, and course offerings, as state and other revenues have not kept pace with the increasing energy costs, healthcare, and consumer inflation driving higher employee costs. And we understand that the governor has provided specific direction to agencies related to funding requests. We hope you will consider colleges' true needs as you have in the past, as we collectively seek to improve the opportunities and outcomes for students while remaining good stewards of public tax dollars. And now I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Scari. I'm Dina Farrell. I'm the Vice President of Finance and Business Services and Chief Financial Officer for Portland Community College. And I'm here to talk to you, add to Lisa's comments. Colleges have been making tough decisions to raise tuition and make cuts, yet are still spending down reserves in order to maintain student services. At PCC, we made a $20 million reduction in fiscal year 23 and anticipate a need for significant budget reductions in 25 to plan for the 25-27 biennium. We have also had to increase tuition to help offset costs. For the 23-24 and 24-25 academic years, we increased tuition by 4% or $5 per credit. And without additional resources, we will have to continue increasing. Community colleges across the state are seeing positive gains in enrollment, but are grappling with a larger issue of increasing costs and changing service models that better meet the needs of the students. To help understand changing models and costs, I'd like to share some examples of what we are referencing. CTE courses are in high demand from employers and students and more costly to run. At PCC, we offer semiconductor workforce training, nursing, radiation technology, and welding, just to name a few. The equipment for all of these programs is expensive. Class sizes are often smaller, and the faculty can be difficult to recruit and retain due to high salaries in industries like manufacturing, technology, and healthcare. Yet these industries are driving college enrollment and meet the economic needs of our region and the state. PCC's microelectronics program has a 95% hiring rate with high starting wages, but has costly equipment required for training. We see the highest rate of success for our underserved and first-generation students when we provide increased staff support throughout the student journey. However, this comes with a heavy staffing cost. This can include holistic long-term financial and advising support, higher touch orientation for new students, success coaches, job internship resource support, career guidance, and connection to four-year universities. With these types of programs like Future Connect, students are completing more credits in their first year than their peers and are persisting, transferring, and completing certificates at nearly twice the rate of students who are not receiving this intervention upon the start and during their college careers. Colleges are facing dramatic increases in spending, including salary increases to meet the cost of living, increased service contracts and utilities. Cost utilities alone have increased by about 22%. Like Dr. Scari said, at PCC, we're also seeing headcount grow faster than FTE. When students attend part-time, their base costs are the same as full-time students, but they spend less on tuition. Unfunded mandates, such as Oregon paid medical leave, have also resulted in significant impacts to budgets. To mitigate the increasing costs in PERS, we've issued 2 PERS bonds. Other community colleges have done the same, all with the goal of reducing the impact of the PERS rate increases. Without this financing, our PERS rate would be considerably higher, creating an additional burden on state funding requests. Additional contributing factors are HECC's decision to go from total cost of attendance to tuition and fees when allocating the Oregon Opportunity Grant in 2023. Community college students received less grant aid than their university counterparts, leaving colleges in a position where we must use a greater share of our resources towards serving the holistic needs of underserved students like housing, childcare, food support, to ensure student success doesn't decline. All of Oregon's community colleges are making difficult choices that balance the need to serve students with the current fiscal reality. While we know that it will be tough to see the needed increase in the CSL, we must address changes in budgets to continue to serve Oregon's most vulnerable students. And now I'll turn it back over to John.
Thank you, Dina. And I'm going to now try to quickly run you through our request and through some slides that talk about it and give you a little bit of context for how we got here. Next slide, please. Oh, that is Guthrie, you just jumped ahead 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slides.
Sorry about that. Let me bring it back.
I think you did. The second one should be a map of the state with people's faces on it.
Here we go. Apologies.
Oh, no worries. Thank you. Okay, so just to get started here, just a reminder that Oregon's community colleges, we are one of 12 or 13 sort of systems in the country that are truly comprehensive, where we do everything from GED and adult basic skills to lower division transfer and CTE to workforce programs that lead directly to employment, English as a second language. We are truly comprehensive, and that is only the case for about 12 or 13 states. One of the things that you heard about today, and we want to talk a little bit about, next slide, please, is the way that enrollment has changed over time. And you can see that here, and this is actually a 10-year span, but I did want to point to a couple of things. One is, you can see on the left, CTE has gone from 13 to 17% over 10 years. Now, in smaller percentages, that doesn't seem like very much, but it's actually a 25% increase in CTE over that time. And those are our most expensive courses. So, and that's a very positive thing because they also lead very directly to employment and often have higher wages. But those are the most expensive courses for the college to offer. The next column to the right, I think this is another good news story. We have more than cut in half the amount of traditional 4-credit developmental education that we are doing. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in one of our policy option package recommendations, which is about moving students to a co-requisite model that we know to be so much more effective and cost students less, as Dr. Scarry talked a little bit about. The next, you can see we've shifted more towards lower division, the traditional lower division transfer students, and then where we have fallen off over time is in that non-credit. But in many cases, that is because well, over 10 years ago, the state stopped paying for community education, those non-credit community education courses. Some of those are still very critical to their communities, particularly communities with large populations of senior citizens, who these are really how folks stay active in their communities, and it's good for their mental and social well-being. But again, the state does not support those courses, and so those are self-supported by the colleges, and that probably explains some of the drop-off. Next slide, please. So here, this talks about the enrollment. You remember 2 years ago, we were looking at a very sort of depressing graph that showed kind of historic pandemic-related free fall in enrollment. And we really want to talk about and be able to show you here today where that is starting to change. And we're particularly seeing it in the head count, where we have moved up 10% in head count over the last couple biennium or the last couple of academic years. And anecdotally, and more than anecdotally, the numbers that colleges have been seeing are, we believe, moving in this direction in headcount as well. So we are getting back closer to those pre-pandemic numbers. And this, you may remember too, as we had talked last time, part of our concern was about trying to maintain some capacity for when students did start to come back, and we are now seeing that. As President Scarry pointed out, it's coming back slower in FTE than it is in headcount because we were getting many more students coming back for short-term certificates, particularly some of those workforce certificates. So they were part-time students who were also working. So our FTE is coming back as kind of a lagging indicator, though that is starting to pick up too. So as President Scarry said, we have more students that we have more students taking fewer credits, which means they cost a bit more. The more tuition are paying, the more that's really defraying the base cost, which is fixed. Every student kind of pays the same or costs and pays the same base costs for transcripting and all of those things that you pay whether you're taking 1 course or 6 courses or 4 or 5. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. This is I really apologize. I changed the slide on the presentation I have in front of me. You didn't, it had not changed on your screen. So this is the FTE slide that I had just been talking about, where you can see in 2021, we're still going down, where that is the point where our headcount started to turn the corner. But in 21-22, we now are starting to see also FTE pick up, and we're hearing at the colleges, almost all of the colleges are seeing both FTE and headcount growth. So that is very good news. Next slide, please. So here we just want to, we did want to talk about one of the things that I think that the colleges, right, and I'm sure this is probably true for the universities too, that these have been very challenging times where colleges are still going about the good work they're doing and trying to play fundamental and innovative roles in their communities. And we just wanted to point to a couple of those or a few of those areas. Next slide, please. So this is just one example. Umpqua Community College in the last couple of years purchased housing in downtown, in buildings that weren't being used in downtown for student housing. That has really provided for them and really helped reinvigorate that downtown and provide economic and cultural vibrancy, as well as fulfilling both a housing need in their community and a way to help keep students in the community. Next slide, please. Similarly, Mount Hood Community College has partnered with College Housing Northwest to open a new student community in Gresham, in the Gresham area in fall of 2024. They were one of the earliest adopters of College Housing Northwest's affordable rents for college student program to provide rents and rents assistant and personalized supports to students referred by partners. This is just, I think, another good example of the way through very challenging times. And as you know, our students have been facing both housing insecurity, food insecurity, and colleges are really trying in every way they can, creative ways that they can, to help address some of those needs. Next slide, please. This is just another way that Portland Community College in particular has been addressing what has been one of the biggest needs in our state recently, which is addiction counseling programs, as we have seen real issues around behavioral health and addiction in Oregon, and this has become a real priority for legislators, as I'm sure all of you know, and the state as a whole. And we have many of our colleges who are direct training providers for folks who are going out directly into the field to work in these areas. Next slide, please. All right, well, part of what we're asking the HECC to do today is to help us keep the momentum going. Even though this has been a very challenging time for colleges, we think there's been a lot of good work, whether it's some of the projects we just through the issues, the areas we just talked about, also things like the developmental education work that's been going on, that has been ongoing through kind of challenging times. And we really tried to sort of build our policy option package requests and our budget around kind of keeping that momentum going and putting equity first. Next slide, please. And this is just a quote. Well, I will just read. Equity prioritizes the creation of opportunities for minoritized students to have equal outcomes and participation in educational programs that can close the achievement gap in student success and completion. And we really do is we build both our current service level budget and kind of in particular our top three policy option packages really tried to keep an equity lens at the forefront. Next slide, please. So we're going to start with our policy option packages before I actually get into the current service level model. And again, I wanted to point, particularly when we're talking about an equity lens, these first three. The co-requisite work group, I have individual slides, so I'm just going to very quickly touch on these here, and then I will go quickly through the slides. But you can see the co-requisite work group, our applied baccalaureate programs, and our adult reconnect. And then we also have cybersecurity and 8th quarter payment, both vitally important programs that serve kind of a broader need. Next slide, please. So just very quickly, just a quick sort of refresher on what we're talking about co-requisite holistic supports. What we're asking in this policy option package is for $1 million, that one-time funding of about $1 million that would mostly be used for faculty release time. Because the transition, faculty really do own the coursework here, and part of the transition is moving from traditional DevEd, where you can see at the top here, students take 1, 2, 3 courses before they get to the gateway math course in this case. And in a co-requisite model, they take them at the same time. So they take their immediately admitted to the college level course and are taking a co-requisite course side by side. It triples success rates of getting to the college level course. We know this to be a very successful model. It's a modest ask, but we hope you will continue to partner with us on this, because we are currently working very closely with CCWD. And as you know, the legislature passed a work group on this through CCWD that we are currently working with you on. Next slide, please. Okay, this piece, as many of you know, the colleges are now able to offer applied baccalaureate programs, and this policy option package would provide funding for about 12 new applied baccalaureate programs around the state. One of the things you see nationally is the types of students that enter applied baccalaureate programs are different than the traditional university students taking four-year programs. They tend to be older. They're more likely to be student parents. They're more likely to be underrepresented students who aren't being served very well. So it really is a different population. This is actually the first cohort of Chemeketa leadership management program. We also are looking potentially at ongoing funding for applied baccalaureate programs, but you have been tasked through legislation in the interim session to provide some analysis before the Ways and Means Committee in the 2025 session. And I think we're looking to continue to work with you and kind of look as that analysis goes forward and see what may or may not be needed in that area. Next slide, please. Okay, the next one is this is actually 10 million in ongoing funding for Adult Learner Reconnect. To the degree there is low-hanging fruit in Oregon kind of education, we believe this is one of those areas. I always think an interesting statistic is the largest cohort of learners in Oregon are those people with some college, no degree or certificate. That's the largest cohort. And so if you can recapture those folks and get them to a degree or certificate, you have a really good return on investment. And this program attempts to help push those folks forward. And it really, we may not talk about it as much as we used to, but if you're looking at the state's 40-40-20 goals, you can't get there with only pipeline students. You have to take some of the existing Oregonians who don't have degrees and help push them across the finish line. Next slide, please. Okay, this I won't go into. We had a requirement, I will, but not too, I won't belabor it. This is a very important issue. The Higher Education Coordinating Commission did recommend a larger than this request by us and the universities in the last biennium. We have scaled this down to try to make incremental change towards better cybersecurity. This would be enough for base funding for basically every college to have kind of the bare minimum in cybersecurity, or to pay for a subscription service that several of the colleges are using that we got kind of a consortium rate on. That's what this is based off of. But it's important to note, this does not solve the entire problem. This is base level funding, so all of the colleges have like the base protection that they would need. Next slide, please. And last on our policy option packages is the 8th quarter payment. Some of you may be familiar with this. This 8th quarter payment has had its 20th anniversary this year, which is in 2003. To balance the state budget, the state legislature deferred the final payment for community colleges and K-12 to the 1st quarter of the next biennium to balance the budget. K-12 gets monthly payments, community colleges get quarterly payments. So it is a full quarterly payment that is missing for the last year of the biennium, where colleges have to take money out of reserves, where they lose interest that they would otherwise be earning, or in some cases, colleges actually borrow money to get through that deferred payment. What this policy option package does is ask for one-time funding. It would cost about $150 million to fully pay off the one-time payment. Another solution that we have considered is that you could sort of split the difference with the legislature, and then if the legislature paid off half the payment and split the final payment of the biennium into a half payment, so instead of a 1/8 payment, they would get a 1/16 payment, and then at the beginning of the next quarter, they would get the other half of a payment. That would put about half the responsibility for that check that the colleges have been floating for the state. The state would now be bringing half of it back into the current biennium, and then the colleges would still be floating half of that payment moving forward. The reason we cut it in half is because we have gotten feedback from legislators that $100 to $115 million, even in one-time funding, is a lot to contemplate. But again, this has been something that has been slowly costing the colleges money every biennium, at the end of every biennium for the last 20 years. Next slide, please. All right, now we get into the current service level. Just some quick summary points on the current service level. Student enrollment continues to increase across the state. That is good news for our revenues moving forward. But costs are projected to grow at 14.9% for the biennium. Many employee contracts have reflected recent high inflation. That's part of what is driving that number. And then this has been really the final biennium of relief funds that colleges are drawing down. And those were both the HERF and the, I can't remember the other acronym we use of federal funds, but also we've had a few colleges receive the employment retention credit, and so have been using that to retain employees. That will be gone, and then some colleges will have some tough decisions to make as that credit goes down, and are making plans for that. Next slide, please. So this is the model that we have been using and that several of you are probably familiar with for the last several biennia. This simply, the colleges, each business officer, each colleges plugs in what their current, what their actual revenues are for 23-24, what their projected are for 24-25, and then we plug in the costs, which are in the next two slides, which derive us here in the, if you look in the column that says change to next biennium, the one marked in green, the 14.9% represents what it would cost for colleges to move forward, balance the budget without roughly maintaining current service level. And as you can see here, we have plugged in tuition and fee increases of about 3% per year of that biennium. The 22.9% represents what it would cost if colleges also, if you zeroed out the reserve spending that has been happening. We have that there for context, excuse me, so you can see it. As Dr. Scari said, the colleges have moved from a rate of about 5.5% of the total being spent in reserve spending and cut that by about 40%. And so it's moving, we think, in a positive direction, but there's still work to go. The reason I also say, and you will see in our closing slide, at 14.9%, this model is a composite. Each college puts in their numbers, and it says as a total, you would need a 14.9% increase. But it's the Community College Support Fund that distributes this money. So if you are a college that in your spreadsheet, you might say need a 20% increase to the Community College Support Fund to be whole, where another college might only need a 5% increase. This aggregates it, but it doesn't show you what is happening necessarily at each college. So even at 14.9%, you would have some colleges still in a situation where they're making cuts because, again, this is a composite. The Community College Support Fund has its own formula for how the money actually gets distributed. But we think, and the reason we continue to use it is because using actual numbers as a starting point, we think is as close as we can get to a true CSL. Next slide. Well, actually, sorry, could you go back, Guthrie? I apologize. One of the major areas here that we were obviously seeing real free fall in our tuition revenue that has started to go back up. And again, you can see in that bottom row, or second to bottom row, where the federal relief funds have been finally drawing down. Next slide. These just, again, we have two versions of this slide. One that includes, this is the one that doesn't include the reserve spending. So these numbers are adjusted for the reserve to take out reserve spending. So this just shows our areas of spending. One of the major areas where our CSL tends to deviate from the state CSL, from what the Department of Administrative Services and Legislative Fiscal Office put out, is in healthcare, and that OEB, the Oregon Education Benefits Board, in statute can only go up 3.4% per year on average statewide. Healthcare inflation is about twice that, so that while the rates may only go up 3.4% on average, the benefits go down at that rate because healthcare inflation is higher than that. So what the colleges actually bargain will be higher, and that's one of the main areas of difference. The other, and you heard some about this, is, and this is, I would say, ongoing work for us, is we are trying to get a handle on what the cost of the most recent unfunded mandates have been. We always try to capture those in this model. Some of the colleges are still working through that. So that is sort of a piece of ongoing work. The other thing I would point to is when you look at these changes to the next biennium, these are unweighted averages currently, and we're working on a second version of this that we'll be working through with Jim and David next week, that shows what the weighted averages would be, because what we're seeing in particular is that some of our urban colleges where inflation's been particularly high, their salary numbers were higher than 4.5 and 4.5% per year. That is an unweighted average. You see the actuals in the total amounts between 23-25 and 25-27, but those are unweighted averages that don't reflect the fact that some of our urban schools have really negotiated higher contracts based on very high housing increase prices and things like that. Next slide. So this simply shows, yeah, there you go. They look, it's easy to get confused. These look very similar. This simply shows the same thing with what the current reserve spending net right now is, about 64 million, 63.8. That is the gap that colleges will be making up as we move into the next biennium. As some of those federal funds were being drawn down. And then next slide, please. So just key takeaways. Again, community colleges have been innovative through challenging times. With a 14.9% increase, there will still be reductions at several of the colleges because, again, it really is a composite. If a college needed a 20% increase to the Community College Support Fund to be whole, you would need the Community College Support Fund to go up at least about 20%, right? And that's just not how distribution formulas work. And then community colleges are adapting to serve changing student needs. This has really been the case post-pandemic. We were seeing some of these trends before. They definitely were accelerated through the pandemic. And then finally, state support, as you well know, is critical to maintaining access and fostering student success. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions. And again, I also have, I believe, another one of our business officers, along with Dina, online. If you have any questions specific to the model, or want to get into the weeds.
So Lisa, and John, and Dina, I just want to thank you for your presentation. It's always, I think, very helpful to us to hear from you on the ground level about the kinds of work you're doing and the resource needs that are related to that work. We are about 15 minutes behind schedule. I want to make sure we have time for clarifying questions, but just want us to be aware of time. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devlin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just make a request for a question. Could someone get back to me from the Community College Association about what has been, see the best way to phrase this, their experience with pension obligation bonds?
We can do that, yeah.
Okay.
Do you have other clarifying questions? Well, again, I want to thank you for your presentation. It's good to see you guys, and thank you for I think the very informative presentation. I especially enjoy the focus on some of the work that you're doing. I think to expand our connection with students that we haven't always connected with, and I'm grateful for your focus on that. So thanks again. We're going to move on to the next presentation from the Oregon Student Association. I think we have Nick with us, and thank you. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you. Guthrie, I'm going to share my screen if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Sorry, just one sec.
It should be the up arrow button up in the top right hand of the screen. Oh, there we go.
Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for having me here today. My name is Nick Keogh. I am the Legislative Director for the Oregon Student Association. As you probably know, OSA represents students at Oregon's community colleges and public universities. I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you all about OSA and students' perspective on HECC's agency budget for the upcoming biennium. And before I get started, I woke up a little sick today, so I'm a little hoarse, and so just bear with me. I'm making it through it. To just give a rundown of my plans for our remarks today is, first, I just want to talk about our vision for college affordability here in Oregon. And of course, we want to give you all our recommendations for the Public University Support Fund, Community College Support Fund, and the Oregon Opportunity Grant. So like I said, I want to chat first about what OSA's vision is for the future of college affordability here in Oregon. To begin, I wanted to start with this because I really want to ground us in our long-term vision for the future of higher education here in the state of Oregon. Now, I know that I don't have to tell everyone in this room how critical our higher education system is to the future of our society and to our state. We all know that a well-educated workforce is essential for fostering economic growth, and that higher education plays a key role in equipping individuals with the skills and expertise needed for innovation and contributing to various sectors of our economy here in Oregon. Beyond individuals with higher education qualifications having access to more diverse and rewarding career paths, we also know that higher education encourages civic engagement and responsible citizenship by fostering critical thinking skills, communication skills, and a broad understanding of the world. Educated individuals are more likely to be informed about societal issues, participate in democratic processes, and contribute to community development. Knowing all of this, it's really hard to overstate just how much is on the line for the future of Oregon. So thus, we believe that we must do everything we can in our power to work towards a future where equality, equitable, debt-free higher education is affordable and accessible for all Oregonians. So what does that actually look like? So this is a quick snapshot of what our vision for the future of college affordability is here in Oregon. And first, we know that it is going to require a transformative state investment where we establish commitment from the state legislature to prioritize funding to cover full tuition costs and operational costs for Oregon's universities and colleges. We also envision tuition-free programs where we eliminate tuition barriers by implementing tuition-free programs for all residents at public universities and community colleges here in Oregon, and pairing that with full coverage financial aid. So we should be working to expand financial aid programs to cover additional costs associated with attendance, such as books, housing, and transportation. And on every step of the way, and working towards this vision, we should be centering underrepresented students and equitable student success at every step of the way. So this is, a little bit about what our vision is. And I think, we all are painfully aware that we are nowhere where we need to be. We have a really long way to go towards that long-term vision of debt-free higher education for all Oregonians. And to just talk about where we're at in this current moment, I know you've just heard about it a little bit from the colleges and from the universities. But today here in Oregon ranks 32nd among states for public investment in higher education, with our public universities ranking 45th overall in 2022. We just heard that Oregon's community colleges are facing critical funding shortfalls, resulting in cuts to programs and services and continual tuition increases. And we know that Oregon's two largest financial aid programs, the Oregon Opportunity Grant and the Oregon Promise Grant, are funded well below the national average. So this just really goes to show how far we really have to go. But next, I just wanted to, talk about, we are constantly talking about, how state investment impacts our institutions. But I want to talk a little bit about how it particularly impacts our students. Mostly with affordability, being one of the biggest barriers for our students. And sorry, one sec. Oh yeah, here I am. Okay, so the lack of state investment in Oregon has resulted in significant reliance on tuition and fee dollars. Students today are bearing a larger share of the cost burden than previous generations. At every single university in Oregon, student tuition and fees make up more than half of total revenue, one of the highest proportions in the entire nation. We also see that, the lack of state investment in Oregon has resulted in significant tuition increases that compound every year. So you can see this headline from the Oregon Capital Chronicle last week that tuition is increasing at all of Oregon's 7 public universities in the next academic year, as well as many of Oregon's community colleges. And so this is, obviously presenting a significant cost barrier for students being able to achieve their degrees. And what this looks like on a national scale is that last year, Oregon was ranked the 4th most expensive state in the nation to pursue a college degree. So, tuition has increased far above inflation and hasn't kept pace with wages over the last decade. And that has resulted in us now being one of the most unaffordable states in the nation to attend college. building onto that, we also are seeing that, students, the living expenses that are associated with the rising costs of tuition have created significant financial obstacles for college and university students in Oregon, particularly those from underrepresented backgrounds. We're seeing now as well that across Oregon, college and university students are experiencing increases rates of housing instability, food insecurity, and challenges of affording and accessing textbooks, transportation, childcare, and all the other costs associated with their basic needs. So this is why you have seen OSA working on basic needs legislation over the last few years. And the next thing I really want to remind folks of is that, of course, the lack of state investment and high tuition rates are impacting current and future students. But we should be mindful that generations of students and Oregonians have gone through our unaffordable higher education system now. And we are seeing a significant increase in student debt here in Oregon. And so currently, the average student debt, loan debt for an Oregon borrower is $39,507. And so we know that many low and middle income students are taking out student loans in order to afford post-secondary education. And when we see debt rates, this high, it's very alarming because it has significant economic consequences for Oregon and for our country, right? We know student loan payments can consume a significant portion of a borrower's income, making it really difficult to cover other essential expenses. We know that student debt can delay major life milestones such as purchasing a home, starting a family, or pursuing an advanced education or training. And we know that student debt disproportionately affects low-income individuals and communities of colors. And so, there is really a lot on the line when it comes to increasing state investment in post-secondary education. It's about making the current system affordable for current students and future students, and ensuring that we aren't continuing to grow the student debt crisis here in Oregon. Awesome. So next, I'm going to talk, given all that, we're going to talk about what we believe the state should be doing to invest in higher education. I know you just all heard from the colleges about the CCSF and the PUSF, so I'm not going to spend too much time on them. We are generally supportive of the numbers that the universities and colleges have presented today, but we do believe it could go a lot further. While our numbers today that I'm going to share or may not be fully realistic for this current moment, or may not have exact dollars and cents identified, they do represent what we believe the true need is and what we should all be working towards in the long term. So for the 2025-2027 biennium, we are suggesting that the Public University Support Fund is funded at a level that prevents tuition increases at all public universities in Oregon for the entirety of the 2025-2027 biennium. An investment in PUSF that also maintains current programs and wraparound services and keeps pace with inflation. Yes, so that is our recommendation for the PUSF. And like I said, we don't have exact dollars and cents, but we look forward to continuing to work with you all to identify what this would look like in the future. Next, I'm going to chat really quickly about the Community College Support Fund. Our recommendation for that is similar, that we are suggesting that the CCSF is funded at a level that prevents tuition increases at all community colleges in Oregon for the next biennium, that maintains current programs and wraparound services, and that keeps pace with inflation as well. Which I think the inflation piece is a really important piece. Like, for example, at PCC, I was recently talking to one of their government relations folks, and I know that just in the last few years, the electricity bill at PCC has increased significantly. So there are these incredible growing costs that our institutions are needing support on covering. For the Oregon Opportunity Grant, are the state's largest need-based financial aid program. Our recommendation is to fund the Oregon Opportunity Grant at a level that covers all costs associated with tuition and attendance for every single Oregon student for the 2025-2027 biennium. And that allows award amounts to keep pace with the rising cost of being a student. And like I said, we don't have exact, dollar amounts on this at the moment, especially given, the ongoing developments at the federal level that are impacting financial aid programs here in Oregon. And so instead, we are making the suggestion of how we should approach the funding of this in the future. And it is my understanding that the HECC is currently working on crunching some numbers that try to capture what level of funding would be needed to cover every single student's full cost of attendance in Oregon for the next biennium. So I look forward to hearing more about those as those numbers are developed over the summer by the commission. Where are my slides? Here they are. And so now I know, the first thing you probably all are thinking is, how is Oregon going to afford this? And the answer we like to tell people is that we can't afford not to. Our future economy, our workforce, and our very democracy is on the line. And so we have to really get serious about identifying sustainable and transformative revenue for Oregon's post-secondary education system, because this is what we should all be working towards, and nothing less. Finally, to close, as fun as it is to dream and scheme about our long-term vision, we understand the reality of this current moment and where the state legislature is currently. And so, we know that Governor Kotek has issued a 1% cap for agency request budgets for the next biennium. And for HECC, this would be around 31 million. And, let's be clear, $31 million is not enough to meet the needs of students in the PUSF, CCSF, and OOG, and all the different areas that the HECC agency budget touches for the next biennium. We know this, and we know the governor probably knows this as well. And so we do know that, that outside the agency request budget, that the governor is open to hearing additional information or receiving supplemental information about the necessary investments. And we know that HECC plans to submit a supplemental letter that makes the case for the true needs of the investment in the PUSF, CCSF, and OOG, which we know surely exceeds a $31 million cap. And while we understand that the HECC will likely need to take an approach that's incremental and that is within reason, we do encourage the commission to really keep in mind and center what our long-term vision is for college affordability here in Oregon. And finally, our last suggestion today is that if we are held to a $31 million cap, which let's hope that's not the case, outside of making small investments in co-requisite support and other high-impact, low-cost items, the HECC should prioritize investment, a majority of the $31 million to be invested into the Oregon Opportunity Grant. And our, justification for this is that we think the Oregon Opportunity Grant is, the highest impact area where we can put investment, given that OOG recipients show really remarkable progress through college and university compared to other low-income students, and that they tend to complete their degrees at faster rates. So, it really is our opinion that we should prioritize as much investment in the Oregon Opportunity Grant as possible. So just to close up, I just wanted to also mention that, OSA is wrapping up our statewide student survey, which is the last phase of our 2-year issue choosing process that we do leading up to every long session. And so right now across Oregon, students are taking the statewide survey where they are being asked to rank 10 identified student issues from least pressing to most pressing. And the results of this survey have historically informed a lot of our legislative advocacy and just ensuring that we are aligned with the interests of students. And so that survey is still ongoing. It's we're about over 1,000 students have taken it so far, and it will end next Wednesday on May 15th. So I look forward to sharing the results with you all sometime in June. But for right now, the issues that are ranking at the top, probably to no surprise, are student basic needs access, student housing, and textbook affordability. So I know, you know, it is highly likely that in the next session that OSA will be pursuing a bill related to basic needs, housing, and textbook affordability. So we are actively talking with legislators right now about pulling that together. And obviously we would love the commission and commissioner's support on that advocacy. So I will keep you posted on how that continues to develop. But yeah, thank you all for your time. Happy to answer any questions. Yeah, thank you.
Nick, thank you so much for your presentation. I really appreciate the sort of the combination of a truly aspirational goal with regards to eliminating the affordability barriers for students and a little bit of pragmatism at the same time. And that's really nice. But I think it's really important for us not to lose sight of those big goals. And I really appreciate your putting those in front of us. So are there any clarifying questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Rowe.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Nick. I just have a quick clarifying question. And obviously data can come from a lot of different sources, and we're in complete agreement that the debt load for students is a crisis. But I'm wondering the source of your slide that says almost $40,000, because that's not consistent with the more recent figures I've seen.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Prior to this presentation, I reached out to the student debt ombudsman person for Oregon. Their name is Lane Thompson. And they sent me the most recent data they had prior to this presentation. So I just pulled directly from there. And I'd be happy to share that with you as well.
Thank you. Please do. Maybe that's not at graduation. I guess that's a question too. But thank you very much. We'll get to the bottom of what the correct figure is, knowing that it's bad no matter what.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, Nick, thank you so much for your presentation. Really enjoyed it. It's very informative. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Have a good day.
Sure. We're going to move on to our presentation from faculty and staff, and I think I don't know who's leading on, Enrique or David.
Hi, it's Enriquez here. I'm happy to go.
There's Enrique. Great.
Well, good afternoon, fellow commissioners. My name is Enrique Ferreira, for the record. It's a pleasure to see and hear all of you. As a former commissioner, I miss the work that all of you do. And I'm here because, as you know, we have a budget that we need to advocate for, and we need to work with to fully fund our community college systems. I am the vice president of the Oregon Education Association of 42,000 members, and I represent community colleges and K-12 members across the state. But also, I'm an academic advisor career coach at Clackamas Community College. And as you know, some of you may remember, I sat at the HECC from 2018 to 2021. As you craft your agency request budget, I urge you to consider investing in students and educators alike. My three main asks for you is to invest in student aid, call for more wraparound student supports, and urge pay equity for part-time faculty. As you will hear and have heard from my colleagues, Nick at OSA, attending college is the least affordable more than ever. To give students the relief that they need, this budget must reflect more student aid. Ideally, the Oregon Opportunity Grant should cover the cost of tuition and other education needs and wraparound services for anyone whose income is under the local living wage in their community. Financial aid isn't the only thing that supports students. Our classified staff members provide support through financial aid management, outreach, engagement of programs, administration, research support, information technology, and development skill trades, food services, and more. Students need more than just wraparound services to support their education. Additionally, as our state faces a workforce shortage, we must look into our existing pipeline. Community college have been a staple in our communities, promoting career advancement and helping students achieve their dreams. Not only that, but in many communities, community college are some of the most top employers in the area. However, over the last several years, community college have been cutting costs by relying on part-time faculty, paying them at a radically lower rate than their full-time counterparts. In some cases, as little as 36 cents to $1 for the same course. While full-time folks do have a greater responsibility on the day-to-day basis, AFD Oregon's research shows that part-time faculty have 85% of the same responsibilities as full-time faculty members. This fact lends itself into faculty burnout and makes it hard to recruit for positions. The HECC should call for this legislature to enforce institutions to pay fair practices. As you bring forth your agency request budget, please make sure your budget reflects the values of all our students, our community, but also allows to provide student support and wraparound services and part-time faculty equity pay. Thank you.
Thank you, Enrique. More presenters? I think we have a list. So, you know,
I think I may be next in the roster.
yeah, hi. Ready.
Yeah, hi. Chair Rowe, Vice Chair Heyman, Executive Director Cannon, and Commissioners. For the record, my name is David Ramos. I'm here today on behalf of SEIU Local 503, which represents around 4,000 workers at the 7 public university campuses who make up the majority of non-teaching and non-management positions at these institutions. On behalf of our members, I want to thank the Commission for the opportunity to provide verbal testimony on the higher education budget for the upcoming biennium, and for the opportunity to share our perspective on what should be the strategic priorities of the state of Oregon for post-secondary education as you all begin to develop your agency request budget. As has been mentioned, numerous times over the course of this meeting, higher education has been in a challenged state, not just in Oregon, but nationally. Enrollment rates have, for the most part, been declining across our public universities, disproportionately impacting our state's technical and regional universities, which are critical contributors to the regional economies of the areas they are in and play an outsized role in supporting historically marginalized student populations. We hear from our members and their families that one of the main barriers to higher education is the cost of tuition. And as we are all keenly aware, in Oregon, one of the contributing factors to increased tuition is a gradual decrease in state investment toward higher education, which has left institutions starving for revenue and needing to turn to students and/or public-private partnerships to bring in desperately needed resources. Recent conversations have highlighted strategies institutions are employing to try and contain costs and reach a place of financial stability. While we believe those conversations are important, we don't believe that cutting costs is on its own a solution to tackling some of our state's biggest challenges in higher education, nor do we think the solution is continuing to increase the cost of tuition year over year for already financially burdened students. This is especially pertinent because when it comes to discussing barriers to access, the cost of tuition is simply the entry point for students and doesn't encompass all of the other barriers to access, retention, or completion that students face every single day, whether it's the cost of housing, student hunger, a shortage of wraparound services, the list goes on. Many of those critical wraparound supports that help retain students and improve student success are provided by the dedicated classified staff represented by our union: food services, custodians, health and wellness centers, food banks, childcare providers, and IT specialists, among so many others. That is why, as the HECC prepares its agency request budget, we believe you must prioritize asking the state for sufficient resources to ensure availability of robust student supports provided by faculty and staff, and that those jobs are of high quality so that institutions can recruit and retain talent to provide students with the world-class education they deserve. We must also push for stronger administrative transparency, especially when it comes to the decisions administrators and their foundations make that use public funds. It's important we're holding these institutions accountable for using taxpayer dollars in a way that is most impactful and beneficial for students and in turn the community. Oregon can't continue to balance our higher education budget on the backs of students and staff by increasing tuition or cutting key positions. As you begin putting your agency request budget together, we urge you to ask for no less than a $276 million increase in the Public University Support Fund and $432 million for the Oregon Opportunity Grant, so that hopeful Oregon students with a dream of a brighter future aren't priced out of the opportunity to obtain a college degree, and so that the staff and faculty who are the backbone of these institutions don't need to take on a second job or an external contract just to make ends meet. Our institutions exist for the purpose of educating students, and they don't work without the dedicated staff and faculty who work there. We appreciate the invitation to speak with you today and hope that this is a signal of future opportunities for collaborating throughout this process and in the future. We strongly believe that decision-making conversations that impact our state's public institutions should be had in coalition with stakeholders like our members. By having all voices represented at the table, we believe that we can reach at more equitable and collaborative solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. Let's see, I think the next presenter is Ariana Jacob.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for having me today. Hello to the HECC commissioners, your staff, university leaders, and others in attendance. My name is Ariana Jacob, and I'm the president of American Federation of Teachers Oregon. Our federation represents 27 workplace unions, but importantly, our federation includes faculty, academic professionals, and graduate employees across much of Oregon's public university system. As a labor union leader deeply committed to the well-being and prosperity of Oregon families, I unequivocally advocate for robust funding for our state's public universities. The vitality of our public higher education system is not just a matter of academic enrichment. It's the cornerstone of a thriving economy, a catalyst for social mobility, and an essential ingredient in a healthy democracy. The public university budget discussion comes at a critical time. This discussion is occurring amidst record inflation, skyrocketing housing and food costs, and stagnant wages for many Oregonians. And at a national level, we are in the midst of two deepening crises in higher education: the ballooning student debt and the contingency crisis, where more and more faculty work is being done by underpaid adjunct faculty with little or no job security. Education should be a pathway to opportunity for students and for workers, not a privilege reserved for the affluent few. Oregon's public universities play a multifaceted role in shaping our society. They are hubs of innovation, incubators of talent, engines for economic growth. And by investing in these institutions, we are not simply funding classrooms and laboratories, we are sowing the seeds of progress and prosperity in our state. In all this, we are in very strong alignment with the Oregon Council of Presidents budget presentation, and we appreciate their multi-year stepped budget increase plan to bring us up to at least the national average for state funding for public education. We stand by their call for $1.275 billion for the Public University Support Fund and for record investments in the Oregon Opportunity Grant. We must find a way to change the status quo and make sure that Oregon's higher education no longer ranks among the lowest in the nation in terms of public funding. But beyond that, I believe it is necessary for us to research and aim for a vision of fully funded public education that is debt-free for students and pays a living wage to workers. While this may sound lofty, other states like Massachusetts and New Mexico are actually doing it right now. The challenges facing our public universities are daunting. Years of chronic underfunding have taken a toll on faculty salaries, student services, and infrastructure. This not only jeopardizes the quality of education, it also undermines long-term sustainability for institutions. Institutions should not have to increasingly rely on private investments, philanthropic funding, or finding new or larger income streams to supplement funding what the state should be providing. If we truly value the role of public universities in shaping Oregon's future, we must prioritize adequate and stable public funding. Without a multi-year funding plan that significantly increases the portion of public higher education that is actually publicly funded, we know what will happen. Unbearable student debt for those students that do attend college or university, making it harder for working class, first generation students and students of color to attend, and an increase in reliance on unethical adjunct labor and cuts to full-time faculty positions and staff positions. I urge policymakers to make strong and stable public funding for universities a top priority for the long term. And I know it's not currently seen that way, but I believe that we have to change how we are envisioning what is possible for funding for higher education, not just for these budget years, but for the future. So here are some questions I'd like to ask you to reflect on. How do we build a future where tuition decreases year after year, improving access and affordability for all Oregonians? What are the options for creating ongoing, adequate, stable funding for higher education, and which of these will serve us best? How do we expand the Oregon Opportunity Grant to include up to middle-income Oregonian families? And how do we craft our funding streams so that we ensure public education workers have secure, livable wage jobs so that the funding doesn't go just to administrators, buildings, and while it's incredibly important that it goes to students, we can't leave workers out of the picture. AFT Oregon is ready to work hard to find policy and funding answers to these questions. Moreover, we must work to address the underlying systemic inequities that perpetuate disparities in higher education. This includes addressing inequities in K-12 education, improving support service for marginalized students, and promoting diversity and inclusion on our campus. We also need to work as a state on ongoing issues of housing affordability, wages, and food access for working students, as well as childcare. All these issues intersect. As AFT Oregon's president and an adjunct professor at Portland State for over a decade, I stand firm in my commitment to advocating for adequate and equitable funding for public universities. Together, let us ensure that every Oregonian can pursue their dreams and contribute to the prosperity of our state. Thank you very much for your time.
Ariana, thank you so much. Victor Rees.
Yes, thank you. Chair Rowe, Vice Chair Hammond, Executive Director Cannon, and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Victor Reyes, and I'm the Executive Director of AAUP Oregon. Thank you for inviting me here today to speak on behalf of our members about the financial considerations and strategic priorities the HECC should adopt in order to address our state's ongoing higher education budgetary crisis. Excuse me. In the last 40 years, we've witnessed the systematic underfunding and defunding of higher education at the state and federal level. Today's students have never had the opportunity to enjoy the level of support or public investment in their education that their grandparents or even their parents benefited from. Instead, they've been saddled with the highest levels of debt experienced by any generation of Americans. When they graduate, they face suppressed wages, degraded working conditions, and unaffordable housing that make the American dream impossible for many to attain. Oregonians deserve a public university system that provides accessible, affordable, high-quality education to any person who chooses to pursue it. This goal cannot be met in the present state of our public universities. The fact is, Oregon's public universities have never fully recovered from the financial crisis of 2008, and the progress they made was disrupted by the 2020 pandemic and subsequent changes in student enrollment. According to data collected by the State Higher Education Executive Officers Association, as of 2022, Oregon lagged well behind the national average and was last among our neighboring states in public support for higher education. The HECC clearly has a role to play in reversing this trend. And while this gap cannot be closed in a single biennium, we must begin the process now so as to prevent more students from opting out of higher education due to financial barriers. Therefore, the Public University Support Fund must be increased by no less than $276 million in the 25 to 27 biennium. And a concrete plan must be developed so that our students and their families can see that the state has a roadmap up to meet or exceed the national average over the course of the next several biennia. Furthermore, if we want inclusive institutions providing equitable access to a diverse student population, we must control costs. And the only way to do this is through increased state support. Oregonians who live in rural areas, have lower incomes, and/or are people of color are disproportionately impacted under our present state of anemic funding. These groups are often first-generation college students who need additional support, so we must increase funding for the Oregon Opportunity Grant, wraparound services, and staffing levels to ensure that all Oregonians don't just have access to higher education, they are successful in attaining their higher education goals. We must also re-examine how public funds are used by public university administrators and their foundations to ensure that these increased investments go where they are most impactful: student services to increase their support and success, and faculty and staff wages to recruit and retain world-class talent for our students. We need greater transparency in these budgetary choices because since 2013, tuition and the resultant student debt to pay that tuition have exploded, and an undue amount of this revenue has gone to fund ballooning upper administrative costs. Meanwhile, faculty and staff wages and working conditions have been greatly diminished in the last 10 years. Our wages are stagnating behind record inflation, our full-time positions are facing adjunctification, and when our colleagues vacate a position, the burden falls to those who remain to do more with less. I'm a former instructor at Oregon State University, and that institution can provide a clear example of this problem. According to a recent financial analysis performed by AAUP National, OSU faculty are paid 23.3% less on average than their peers at 33 comparable institutions across the nation when adjusted for cost of living. This analysis also found that investments in upper administration salaries increased by 23% between AY 2019 and AY 22-23, whereas faculty salaries only increased 3% in that same period. Is this the type of strategic investment that will increase student success and worker recruitment or retention? Faculty and staff working conditions directly impact student learning conditions, and the choices made by administrators and backed by institutional boards and foundations have left us in our present state. Thus, increased oversight and guidance from the HECC about how additional funding should be invested into students, staff, and faculty would serve to reverse some of the most egregious budgetary decisions of the last decade. Finally, I'd like to warn against austerity policymaking that results in program closures and a narrowing of higher education to a specific interpretation of workforce readiness. It is a disservice to students, staff, and faculty and undermines the traditional mission of higher education. There has been a growing drumbeat nationally and in our state to close liberal arts programs due to lower revenue and a perceived inapplicability to the modern workforce. However, according to the American Association of Colleges and Universities' 2023 employer survey, the skills and talents developed through a liberal arts education continue to be highly sought after by employers. Therefore, we must avoid succumbing to the ignorant stereotype of the PhD barista and recognize that further investment across all degree programs, not just STEM, will prepare our students for the modern workforce. To conclude, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today, and I'd like to encourage greater inclusion of organized labor voices in the decision-making process going forward. Our state is strongest when all stakeholders and a diversity of viewpoints are consistently included, and through collaboration and relationship building, we can navigate any crisis that confronts our great state. Thank you for your time.
Victor, thank you very much for your presentations. I apologize for mispronouncing your last name. And
no harm
do we
done.
have any do we have any clarifying questions for our staff and faculty representatives? Hearing none, again, I want to thank all of you for presenting, and it really does help us to understand this work, I think, from a crucial perspective, and I thank you for representing that. So we'll move on. Presentation from Workforce Development.
This is Venkat. I hope you can hear me. So Chair Rowe, Vice Chair Haven, and committee members, my name is K.S. Venkatraman. I wear two hats. I'm the executive member of the Workforce and Talent Development Board. I'm also the Senior Director for AI Computing at NVIDIA Corporation. I'm very happy to be here on behalf of the WTDB. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about the board in general. So the WTDB provides visionary leadership shaping the direction of Oregon's workforce system to ensure that it is robust and responsive to the evolving economic landscape. We also serve as key advisors to the governor and the legislature, offering strategic guidance on workforce system strategy, planning, and policy to align with state and economic priorities. And finally, the WTDB leads accountability and continuous improvement efforts, ensuring the workforce system operates efficiently and meets the needs of Oregonians and the economy. Next slide, please. So I want to reflect on some of our priorities. We are enhancing connections between employers and the workforce system through strategic initiatives. Some examples that come to mind are the Oregon Semiconductor CHIPS Act, aligning with our state's economic development priorities. The Industry Consortia for Future Ready Oregon is another example. Our investment in work-based learning, supported by incentives like the R&D tax credit for semiconductors, is preparing Oregonians for the tech-enabled and what I like to say is tech-adjacent jobs of tomorrow. We're advancing equity by eliminating barriers to education and employment, ensuring that every Oregonian has the opportunity to succeed. And if I think of a prime example in this area, it's our broadband expansion efforts. For K through 12, integrating K through 12 education with workforce development through emphasis on essential employability skills and partnerships with STEM hubs and CTE initiatives. I personally feel that we need to push harder at K through 12 curriculum, especially to keep up with technology advancements. But I'm encouraged that we're building a foundation for Oregon's future workforce. And finally, I wanted to point out that we are aligning data with the WorkSource Oregon system to produce actionable performance reports, enhancing transparency and accountability in our workforce development efforts. There is a talent summit on May 14th and 15th in Salem to hear about, you can hear from leaders like Ben Cannon about essential employability skills. So it's a great opportunity to see how these initiatives are shaping Oregon's workforce strategy. Next slide, please. So just in terms of progress that we're excited about, under the Future Ready Oregon initiative, our industry consortia in technology, manufacturing, and healthcare are evolving remarkably well. So as co-chair of the Technology Consortium, I look forward to witnessing firsthand the dynamic partnerships that will enhance our workforce capabilities and meet industry needs. On Prosperity 10K is another example. Our Prosperity 10K goals are being met and exceeded and reflecting the positive impact of our targeted investments on Oregonians and particularly priority populations. So Kim is going to be following me with this presentation, and you'll hear more from her with a detailed update on Prosperity 10K. So we're excited about these examples of progress. And so that's all I had. I wanted to thank you for your time and for inviting me to talk about the Workforce and Talent Development Board.
Who's next?
Excellent. I think that's me. I'm going to assume that's me. Thank you.
Good.
Sure.
Thank you.
I might as well dive in. I know that I've got a slide deck here, but Chair Rowe, Vice Chair Hammond, and members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Kim Parker Jadenas. I'm the Executive Director of Willamette Workforce Partnership, which is the local workforce development board that serves the Mid-Valley. And I also serve as the chair of the Oregon Workforce Partnership, which is the association of the 9 local workforce development boards. And as a reminder, next slide, please. Here is a map of the 9 local workforce development boards that serve the state of Oregon. And each of these directors comprises the board of directors for the Oregon Workforce Partnership. Next slide, please. As Venkat just mentioned, we are on track to meet and exceed goals identified in the Prosperity 10,000 program that was funded under the Future Ready Oregon legislation a couple of years ago. And I want to, there's a lot of information here. I want to highlight just a couple of things. You can see that we are at the top blue line, we are 45.83% of the way through this entire grant. And if you look at how many individuals we have served in the bottom left-hand side, we are at about 46%. So we're on track to serve 10,000 people before this program is no longer funded in 2026. We had some other performance outcomes that have been identified in the legislation, and you can see those in the pie charts at the bottom there, on the bottom to the right, sort of 2/3 of the document. What I want to point out is the participants employed. You see the goal is 75%, and this identifies that we are at 64%. The problem with this data, and we're working to figure out how to solve this, is that this only measures individuals who were not employed when they became enrolled in this program. It does not look at or measure individuals who were employed and then got a better job. So as an example, there was actually a specific individual in the central part of the state who was a gas station attendant, and through Future Ready Oregon Prosperity 10,000 was able to earn their commercial driver's license and then go out and get a job as a commercial driver. So clearly an ability to earn a higher wage, gain a skill, and improve their livelihood. So while this is a little misleading, we are still at 64%, but we believe that if you look at those individuals who were employed at the time of enrollment, that even exceeds the 75% goal. I won't spend a lot of time on this because you can all look at it and read, but just wanted to provide you with this quick overview of the Prosperity 10,000 program. This program was funded with both general fund and ARPA dollars. And of course, the general fund we expended initially and are now in the process of spending through the ARPA federal dollars. Next slide, please. I'll finish and then see if you guys have any questions, if you all have any questions. So in addition to that general fund in the Prosperity 10,000 program, there are 4 ongoing programs that are funded with general fund that the local boards really appreciate because it provides flexibility and really allows us to leverage our federal investments. And those 4 programs are the Oregon Youth Employment Program. And I'm going to speak just super briefly for each of these because I know I'm on a tight timeline. This program works with young people to give them essential employability skills and work experience, gets them ready and gets them out. It's unlike any other program that we run, which is very exciting and has proven to be outrageously successful since it was funded initially about 5 or 6 years ago. And then Competitive Strategies supports the work of the workforce development boards, just sort of our overall convening, collaborating role that we have in our individual communities. Industry engagement helps support the work that we do with our targeted industries in our region. As an example, in the Willamette Workforce Partnership area, we have 2 active consortiums, one working with behavioral health care employers and one with manufacturing employers. That kind of work could not occur without this investment. And then finally, the work experience helps pay for the adults, or what I like to call the grown-ups in our program, to go out and work and receive a wage for experience while they are working with an employer in the community, so that they can become more employable and become a successful member of the community and contributor to their family and the economy. And I believe that is my final slide. Any questions?
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
I believe we have next, Brooke, are you next? Brooke Brownlee?
I am. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah,
Perfect.
welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Rowe, Vice Chair Hammond, and members of the Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Brooke Brownlee, and I'm the Manager of Labor, Workforce, and Economic Prosperity at Portland General Electric. I'm not here today in my capacity with PGE, but as the former chair of the Oregon Conservation Corps, the chair of the Clackamas Workforce Partnership, and a newly appointed member of the Oregon Youth Works Advisory Board. I also serve as the executive director of the Oregon Clean Energy Workforce Coalition, an organization convened by PGE in 2022 to build the equitable and inclusive workforce needed in Oregon to decarbonize the electric sector. Clearly, I have a very strong passion for workforce, if you couldn't tell. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of prioritizing funding to support youth programming within our state. The opportunities provided through the programs administered by Oregon Youth Works provide opportunities for youth to have meaningful paid work experiences through the HECC Workforce Partners and in partnership with the 9 workforce investment boards in the state. These opportunities are provided in all 36 counties and with all 9 federally recognized tribes. While each of the programs have distinct areas of focus, the overarching theme is providing access and serving youth and young people who have traditionally been left behind, underserved, and/or marginalized. My own career path was completely upended by an internship opportunity that I was provided in college through the Port of Portland and their Community Affairs Department. I never knew this type of career existed, and it forever changed my life. The opportunities that I have had because of that career exposure provided to me through that internship have left me to my dream job today. Without it, I would have planned to pursue a career in advertising, which I know for certain would not have provided me with the amount of gratitude and enjoyment that my work does today. This experience is something that is not afforded to many throughout our state, and most importantly, is not provided in an equitable way. I truly believe that if you work in a job that you are passionate about, you are a better and more productive employee because you are driven by that passion every day. Think of the world of possibility and economic growth this state could unlock by helping every youth find their area of passion. I want to highlight one of the Youth Works programs I was deeply involved in over the last 2 years, the Oregon Conservation Corps, as an example of a program investment that works. In 2021, the legislature passed Senate Bill 762, which is the state's comprehensive wildfire package, which included the creation of the Oregon Conservation Corps and an initial allocation of $10 million to invest in wildfire resiliency and youth workforce development initiatives in communities across Oregon. The program was funded again in the 2023 session for an additional $10 million. That second bucket of funding was almost entirely allocated within the first 3 months of this biennium. The state's investment of $20 million over 2 biennia has been impactful, both for the youth that were fortunate enough to participate, but also in the reduction of wildfire risk within our communities that are at highest risk for being impacted by wildfire, and for the homeowners who benefited from the programs. Simply put, this is the definition of a win-win situation. Homeowners reduce the risk of wildfire impacting their homes, and youth learn about careers and have meaningful opportunities to develop critical and important skills. I encourage you to follow up with Doug Denning and his team, who can provide videos and pictures of the amazing work that has occurred by these youth over the last few years. Working in partnership with the local workforce boards throughout our state, funding for youth programs has the potential to be incredibly impactful in expanding the world of opportunity for underrepresented populations. The next generation of engineers, linemen, IT data scientists, and environmental technicians are waiting to be connected to their future career path through career learning experiences, on-the-job training, and internships. We collectively thrive through diversity of thought, background, and experience. This is our opportunity to invest in Oregon's workforce of the future by growing our own. To be successful, we must invest in providing experience for all youth across our state with an intentional focus on those communities who have not been provided the breadth of opportunities that others have. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
You're
Mr. Chair,
muted.
you're muted.
If there are no questions, I think I'm next up on the docket here. I'm Heidi Echeverria, and I thank you for inviting me to provide some information and our budget request from the Oregon Serves Commission. We are a federally required and government-appointed state service commission for Oregon. Oregon Serves is located within the Office of Workforce Investments at the HECC. We were created in 1994 to serve as the state entity for service because of the National and Community Service Trust Act, which was passed in 1993. We're comprised of staff and appointed commission board. We are one of 52 state service commissions. Our vision is to engage individuals, empower communities, and promote an equitable Oregon. And to fulfill that vision, we work toward the mission of advancing volunteerism, service, and civic engagement to enrich lives and strengthen Oregon communities. In this role, we bring a unique service not only to Oregon, but to the HECC in that our programs through service, mentoring, career development, and community involvement serve a dual role in helping others realize their educational career goals, not just workforce programs, but centered on community engagement, civic engagement, and personal development. Furthermore, our greatest role as a state service commission is to administer AmeriCorps funding to local entities who wish to provide opportunities for members to serve while increasing their capacity to meet their community's most pressing needs. Each biennium, Oregon Serves administers a grant process that brings approximately $5 to $7 million in federal funds into the state through our state funding allocation. In addition to the funding sources grantees bring in as a matching grant or matching funding, excuse me, grants are given to organizations focusing on environmental stewardship, veterans and military families, economic opportunity, housing, youth services, health and nutrition, and emergency response. With the funding they receive from us, they place members in local clinics, hospitals, K-12 schools, colleges, universities, tribes, local governments, community nonprofits, and more to provide services such as mentoring, tutoring, trail building, cooking classes, and building a shelter, setting up community gardens, running food banks, and during a disaster, helping to manage volunteer centers and fill service gaps to provide emergency support anywhere from clinics to schools. Not only do Oregon community members benefit, but the members themselves who serve receive valuable professional and personal development opportunities. The members, the AmeriCorps members, are age 17 and up. They receive for their service health insurance, childcare assistance, mental health insurance, a monthly living stipend, training, mentoring, networking opportunities, certifications, and team building and leadership development. In addition, they also receive further education opportunities and an education award equal to the Pell Grant. And because of the support of program partners, the commission, alumni, and others who have benefited from AmeriCorps in their community, in 2021, Oregon became only the 6th state to make the education award exempt from state tax, ensuring that members who serve in Oregon can fully leverage their award and utilize it fully in Oregon institutions. So our budget ask from the Oregon Serves Commission, and to continue to do this critical work, we, as Oregon Serves, we receive grant funding from AmeriCorps in the form of the Commission Investment Fund, which is approximately $175,000 a year, and the Commission Support Grant, which is approximately $295,000 a year. With that, it requires a dollar-to-dollar match, which Oregon Serves meets through state general funds. With this funding, Oregon Serves is able to staff a director, a grant officer, an outreach coordinator, and half-time commission support staff admin. As we approach the upcoming legislative session for the next biennium budget approval, our request is pretty simple and for Oregon Serves to maintain our current service level so that we can continue to ensure, but with an additional request for support of a critical position that will go away without new funding. That position is for our disaster services specialist. Currently, the position is funded through ARPA funds and a state match, which will expire at the start of the new federal year. Our emergency response is a priority of our state commissions, and we see an increase in natural disasters. In Oregon, the Oregon Serves Commission is a responding partner in the state's emergency response plan. We're tasked to coordinate spontaneous volunteers and national service members. As such, we have an important role to educate communities on preparedness, participating in how to participate and coordinate response activities, and to develop resources for recovery. This last year, we launched the state's first statewide database and software for emergency response volunteers. This innovative system provides a way for volunteer managers and volunteers to connect and coordinate in times of crisis. With this system, volunteer managers can assign duties, track hours, track certifications, skills, and more. This platform, Oregon Volunteers in Disaster, also known as ORVID, is a critical tool to address a large capacity gap for many local nonprofits, county volunteer managers, faith-based organizations, schools, and rural communities who are often underserved and under-resourced. Currently, this system is administered by the disaster services specialist, and without funding to fill that gap, when ARPA expires, we will no longer be able to provide that service if we don't fill that gap. In conclusion, the role of Oregon Serves and AmeriCorps is indispensable in fostering a spirit of public service and civic engagement in Oregon. The investments we advocate for today will build a stronger, more resilient Oregon. And we thank you for considering our mission and the critical support we provide to Oregon's communities. I look forward to your support. We look forward to your support in ensuring the continuation and expansion of our services through Oregon Serves. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Jonathan has come on, and you're our next presenter.
Good afternoon, Chair Rowan and Vice Chair Han. My name is Jonathan Colon. I'm Deputy Director of Economic Development for Centro Cultural and co-chair of the Future Ready Manufacturing Consortium. Today, I am here to elevate a reset that we've had in how we are implementing workforce in our state. I think that after COVID, how we've reorganized and how we reestablished new connections is being transformative as CBOs have been able to be elevated into a different table that they have in the past. Centro's mission is a home for Latino culture, and that sort of works with the needs of the community to promote personal growth and empowerment. And we have a series of divisions that sort of impact the conditions that communities are showing up. I think on the resets, I think in this legacy work that you're currently working on, the role of CBOs have become more and more significant than in the past. I know that in past, we were in places where we serve as a point of communications. We were the bulletin boards of communities to engage and to connect into some of those resources. I think that the transformative piece that we're seeing now is that we are at the highest tables looking at the strategies, connecting to how these communities are implanting some of these programs. And our role has been more significantly impacted in how we bridge in people and bridge out people out of the system that has so much to offer. One of the things that has been very significant for us is the ability to work with the entire family. Our organization works with 2, 3, 4 generations at a time. We have to face the issue or the challenge of having a 40-year-old with a 20-year-old going into a sector, and they're both going into that entry. They're both needing short-term careers. They're both needing a level of education and managing that system. I think our workforce system and our community college and our colleges have a really good system to support that individual who gets through the door. But CBOs are on the backside supporting the entire family, supporting sort of that wraparound service and to actually make that family successful. When you're working with 2, 3 generations at the same time, you're also impacting the ability to show new careers, new pathway. In order to get someone into a new sector, I need to convince sometimes the mother, the dad, the grandparent of that household to go into something that has not traditionally been seen or that we've never experienced or has never existed as a career path. I think under Future Ready, under this reset that we've had under COVID, the elevation of CBOs to the table to be a thought partner has been very significant in how we could look at this legacy work that we're doing. I don't know that I have a dollar ask. I think that the ask is to continue to weave that thread of that road of community-based organizations who are on the backside to bridge in the community that we're working through and bridge them back out to continue the growth of those investments. Most recently, I share we had a mother who reached out to say thank you because we ended up connecting with her son who connected to an advanced manufacturing job that she had come to see. And she took that information back, and it was a son who came. Most recently, a cousin who saw that opportunity has come into looking at that with our partnership with our community college. So those are the transformative movements that we have to do in families as we look at, moving people through both our workforce programs, our educational programs, and then back into community and mitigating their ability to be successful as they move forward.
Thank you. I think we have one more presenter, Marin Ariola.
Chair Heyman, Marin should be on the phone, but I'm not sure he's been let into the room yet. Guthrie, are you able to let Marin into the room?
There shouldn't be any waiting room, and I don't see any other folks joining by phone. Shall we move on and circle back and you can text me?
I will do that. Yeah. Thank you.
I think that's great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Then we will move on to the presentation from the Oregon Alliance of Independent Colleges. I think we have Robert Kelly with us.
Hi there. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Rob Kelly, and I serve as the president of the University of Portland, and I'm glad to be with you. On behalf of the members of the Oregon Alliance of Independent Colleges and Universities, I thank you for the $100 million increase to the Oregon Opportunity Grant, our state's primary need-based financial aid program, bringing the total budget to a little bit over $308 million. I am also deeply grateful for your funding of the Oregon Tribal Student Grant on a continuing basis at a little bit over $24 million. These significant investments provide much needed financial aid and expanded educational opportunities for Oregon students seeking higher education. I request that you reaffirm this support by increasing funding for Oregon's need-based financial aid program when you write to approve the Higher Education Coordinating Commission agency recommended budget for the 2025 to 2027 biennium. The Alliance serves as the unified voice for 11 private not-for-profit colleges and universities here in Oregon. And founded in 1950, the Alliance is the only statewide membership organization solely focused on representing private not-for-profit higher education on policy issues. And the Alliance's membership reflects a broad diversity of private, not-for-profit higher education in the state. Some institutions are faith-based, like the University of Portland, but some are liberal arts institutions like Reed or Lewis and Clark. Some have professional schools in law, health care, engineering, business, and some are designated as Hispanic serving institutions. And when you think of the ecosystem of higher education in Oregon, the private institutions play a significant role. But we do have one thing in common. We have a transformational impact on our students, our communities, the state, and in the world. According to the most recent annual report of the Oregon Opportunity Grant, the grant serves nearly 36,000 students in the 21-22 academic year. Approximately 34%, or a little bit over 2,000 of those students from Oregon attend Oregon Alliance independent colleges and universities, and they were able to receive that award. The continued strong agency support for the Oregon Opportunity Grant program for students attending and participating in public or private nonprofit institutions located and headquartered in Oregon is the best and most efficient way to help low-income and first-generation students complete and get access to college. As HECC considers its 2025 to 2027 priority investments, I would like to share some additional data with you to demonstrate the value and return on investment of the grant, both to students in the form of higher earnings and also the people of Oregon in the form of benefits, added income, and social savings. We calculated these figures using the 2020 to 2021 data from our most recently completed economic impact study by Lightcast and the 2022-2023 Oregon Opportunity Disbursement data from the Office of Student Access and Completion. The students benefit cost ratio is 3.5. In other words, for every dollar students invest in an education at the Alliance member institutions in the form of out-of-pocket experiences and foregone time and money, the student will receive a cumulative value of $3.50 in future earnings, which means $8.5 million in Oregon Opportunity Grant awards to private colleges multiplied by the 3.5 figure equals to additional $30 million. For every dollar invested in the Alliance member institutions, the people of Oregon receive a cumulative value of $6.90 in benefits. Which means a little about $8.5 million in Oregon Opportunity Grant awards to private colleges. You multiply this by 6.9, it's $59 million. I also note that 66% of the students who earn a degree at Alliance member institutions work and live in the state of Oregon after graduation. Simply put, they stay and they make our state even better. So as you can see, the Oregon Opportunity Grant is objectively a great investment. Alliance members also support educational attainment for socially, racially, and economically diverse populations. The Alliance network of institutions enrolled over 23,000 students in the fall of 23, with over 16% of those being the first in their family to attend college, and 40% of the people identifying as people of color. Cost of attendance is almost cut in half by institutional aid and public aid when you combine it. So all undergraduate students at Alliance member institutions will, with need, receive institutional aid in the form of grants and scholarships. The percent of undergraduate students who receive the federal Pell Grant is nearly 25%. Of undergraduate students who receive the Oregon Opportunity Grant, it's over 34%. And the percentage of first-generation college students whose need is met fully is 26%. With over 260 degrees of study, the colleges and universities within the Alliance produce qualified, skilled graduates in key employment sectors. When you think about all the degrees that are given in Oregon, education, it's 33%. Health professions, it's 46%. Biological and medical sciences, 30%. Physical sciences, 18%. Legal professions, 69%. Math and statistics, 17%. And this is most important here. Some of the students who graduate from the Alliance network of colleges and universities graduate at the highest rates to degree in the state, reducing their debt liabilities and integrating graduates into the workforce even sooner. And as I said earlier, our students stay in the state of Oregon. As a result of their education from Alliance member institutions, students receive the highest earnings and increased productivity of the businesses that employ them. In the fiscal year 2020 to 2021, our member institutions alumni generated $2.9 billion of added income for the state economy, which is equivalent to supporting 34,000 jobs. These students enjoyed an average rate of return on their investment of 12.5%, higher than the S&P average return of 10.5%. Oregon's private, nonprofit colleges and universities are crucial for the economy, with our member institutions defining what it means to learn, work, and live in the state. Collectively, we're one of the most important anchors for a robust and vibrant knowledge-based economy. And again, making sure that we are always included in the ecosystem of higher education in the state is really important. So that's it from me, Rob Kelly at the University of Portland. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Rob, thank you so much for your presentation. I think it's critically important that we're reminded that our private institutions play a role in achieving our educational objectives for the state and for the strength of a future economy. So I really appreciate your presentation. So any clarifying questions for Rob?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sure. Commissioner Devlin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the speaker, I'd like to see from our staff the corresponding number to your the nearly 2/3 of your graduates or students graduate within 4 years. What the number is for the public universities, and just to state something for a little bit of confusion, I didn't know what Bushnell University was until I did some research, and I've known Northwestern Christian for as long as I can remember, but that's actually what Bushnell is.
Yeah, it is Bushnell now. Yep. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, that's a great opportunity and happy to share any information necessary. I will say at the University of Portland, our students, we graduate, almost 90% of the students in 4 years, second highest in the state and second highest for career, economic paychecks, median and career salary.
That's good.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Great contribution to our statement. Yeah. Guthrie, has our presenter joined us?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Marin Areola, on behalf of the Healthcare Industry Consortium, is standing by on the phone, I understand. Marin?
Okay. Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Great, thank you. I apologize for that. Hi, Chair Rowe and Commission members. My name is Marin Areola. I am the co-chair of the Health Industry Consortium and also part of the Governor's Racial Justice Council, and also co-chair of the Workforce Committee that created Future Ready Oregon. And I apologize for being on the phone. I'm in New York City for my son's wedding, and I couldn't miss that. So thank you for bearing with me on the phone. But so my testimony quickly, basically trying to support the Future Ready Oregon within the realm of how community-based organizations are so important in the work of workforce development. During the pandemic, we saw the need of how community-based organizations came to the aid of working with health providers and lessening the impact of COVID, more specifically with vulnerable and rural communities. And so that model, as a co-chair of the Workforce Committee Creating Future Ready Oregon, we felt that community-based organizations can be the model and have been a model for really transforming workforce development. How? Well, during this past couple of years, we've seen some of the work being done by a local CBO that I work with here in Salem, Oregon. And one of the things that we saw is that CBOs can do a lot of the outreach, engagement, and really provide the culturally linguistically appropriate services to really engage and get vulnerable communities, especially BIPOC and rural communities, into the workforce system. And one of the things that they're doing is really centered on the work of equity, making sure that these communities have access, have services that really meets the needs of these communities in terms of where they live, where they work, where they reside, and that's really important. And one of the things also that the work that the CBOs are doing is providing the wraparound supports, as Jonathan mentioned, that it's really crucial for a lot of these vulnerable communities to engage in workforce development, because learning doesn't happen in a vacuum. They really need the support of a coach, a mentor, of a navigator to really support, and of course also resources to support the students to engage in workforce training, but also to make sure that the learning is effective and safe and comfortable for the student to be more successful in the program. For example, this past year, we developed an EMT program with various partners, including Jamaica Community College, and we recruited about close to 20, mostly Hispanic students that never worked in healthcare, never worked in the EMT service. And we spent a lot of time making sure that they were engaged, they learned about the profession, but also during the training, during the course of their work that they were doing, our staff supported them in terms of providing all the wraparound supports, mentoring, the coaching, the navigation, whatever they needed to make sure that they stick with it, with the learning, with the program. But most importantly, make sure they have the support. Many of these students have never been engaged in workforce development or any type of training. And so one of the things that we've realized that the support, having somebody by their side in their journey of learning, guarantees more success in making sure that they complete and they engage in the learning more effectively. And so one of the things that I'm really supporting Future Ready Oregon is that it's really innovative. It's really centered on the human, on the person that we work with, not on other factors, because we believe that the students that we work with have been left out by the workforce system over the last 20, 25 years. And I think during the pandemic, we saw that the CBOs really have the trust, have the support of the community, and they're the best conduit to really link especially vulnerable workers and vulnerable communities into the new workforce system. And I think it's a system that's very innovative, really centered on the person. And I do believe that in the future, I think the whole entire workforce system really can use the model of Future Ready Oregon to really serve the needs of the most vulnerable communities, the rural communities in Oregon that really need that support. And again, it's really centered on the people, better access, less barriers, the culturally linguistically appropriate to making sure that the learning is effective. And of course, more than anything else, the cost in terms of supports, they're needed. One of the things that we learned is that this type of work is really transformative. It's not just a bandit approach. People that are being served by Future Ready Oregon are being transformative. We work with the youth that was a dishwasher, became an EMT. Now they work for Metro Ambulance here in the area. That's phenomenal. That's really transformative and really making sure that the people are earning better incomes, but also serving the people that we need, because we know that, for example, during the pandemic, we needed more bilingual EMTs. There was a need for that. And in terms of the healthcare industry, we know that there's more need for bilingual, bicultural health providers throughout the whole workforce system of healthcare. So in that note, we believe that support of Future Ready Oregon needs to continue. The resources are much needed and it's very transformative and not a bandit approach. And in the long term, I think the return on the investment will be there within our economy, within our society. And I think everybody wins from the work the Future Ready Oregon is doing in the CBOs. Thank you. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair.
Aaron, thank you so much for your presentation, especially since you have a critically important reason to be focused elsewhere. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
A minute out to be focused with us. Are there any clarifying questions for the workforce presentations? Okay, we will move on Guthrie, do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
No signups, Chair.
Well, thank you so much. That's a miracle. We're back on schedule. With that, I guess we're going to move on to the presentation on public university tuition and fee calculations. And we meet Jim Pinkard. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Jim Pinkard with the Office of Post-Secondary Finance and Capital here at the HECC. As you're aware, the Commission is required to approve increases in public university undergraduate tuition and mandatory fees of greater than 5%. None of the universities will be seeking that approval this year, although one has yet to receive board approval for its proposed increase as noted in the status table in the docket item. But even though we don't expect any of them to seek that approval, the intent of this docket item is to provide you with a summary of the tuition setting process at all the public universities, along with details of the approved increases. For the record, no action on your part is required. Docket item 4.0A provides the specific calculations for each university by campus as necessary and for each cohort as appropriate. Although a weighted average is used across cohorts to assess the applicability to the 5% threshold, presenting the increases by cohort allows for a little bit more visibility on the impact. So for example, if you wanted to see the increase for a first-year freshman at University of Oregon compared to last year's freshman, you can see that on page 3, or for OSU on pages 4 and 5. So with that, I'll take any questions.
We have clarifying questions for Jim. Yes, Commissioner Devlin.
Mr. Chairman, if you'll indulge me, and if Jim will indulge me, I just wanted to note on that page 3 of the addendum, for a U of O student who entered in 2020 as a freshman, now this is with guaranteed tuition, their tuition is now $13,040 for next year. Incoming freshmen are $15,699, which is over a 5-year period, a 20% increase in tuition for incoming students. And U of O is now publishing a cost of attendance for incoming freshman residents of $37,000 a year. And if this kept up for the next 5 years, it would be in the neighborhood of $44,000 a year for tuition and other costs.
Any other comments or questions? Jim, I always said that I've never met a spreadsheet I didn't love, but this might be stretching me a little. So I might have to come back to you some questions, but I think one of the things that it represents is that, calculating tuition increases isn't as straightforward as people might think. And this really digs into the details, especially when you have programs where they, freeze tuition over time, or, guaranteed tuition models, and, or when we have, differential tuition within an institution. So I really appreciate this more detailed information. And again, I just want to see if there are any clarifying questions we have on this. This is we had asked for more detail on this issue, and so Jim put this together for us, and I appreciate that.
Mr. Chair, oh, sorry. Given given the complexity of the calculation with the University of Oregon, because of the way it's keeping tuition flat, would you please at some point for the commissioner for this committee square what Commissioner Devlin has said against your numbers and let us know if there's a difference? And including what the University of Oregon publishes, but just get back to us on that, please.
Certainly.
Mr. Chairman, Jim, if you could do that, I just want to know the assumptions. I use the same assumption for tuition, and I use the general statement that things other than tuition will grow do grow actually faster, but I use the same rate of growth for things other than tuition. And that's what gets you from the 37 to about 44,000 a year. About half, a little bit less than half of that is tuition growth, or somewhat less than that is tuition growth. The rest is growth in room and board and other costs.
Thanks for that clarification. Any other questions or comments for Jim? Again, Jim, I thank you for coming back to this issue with this more detailed information. Anything else for the good of the order?
Just
yes, Jim.
Real quick, Mr. Chairman, I do want to point out that according to data that we have from IPEDS for the 21-22 academic year, which is the latest year that we have, the average net price, which is what first-time full-time resident undergraduates who have been awarded financial aid, what they actually pay after financial aid for University of Oregon was $22,077. So there's a difference between the total cost of attendance, which includes books, supplies, fees, tuition and fees, everything else. And then once you apply financial aid and other remissions and scholarships, institutional financial aid, the number is slightly different. So I just want to point out for folks, there is a difference there. And I think you said it well, Mr. Chair, it's complicated, very complicated. When you start adding in tuition and fees, the impact on the institution, so.
Thank you, Jim. That brings up an issue that I'm not sure how to address, but at some point, the world, because I worked in private education for 20 years, I'm very familiar with the activity which we call discounting, and our public institutions are aggressively adding that to their toolbox for addressing the cost barriers. And so I don't know, at some point it might be helpful for us to have a little primer on discounting models as they're practiced within our public institutions and the impact that has on net costs. That I think that would be helpful. It's just something that we haven't really incorporated into our conversations historically. Anyway, that makes sense to anyone?
So that does make sense, Mr. Chair. If you'll indulge me just for a brief second, I can tell you for last fiscal year 2023, across the 7 universities, they provided the equivalent of $203 million in remissions to their students, and that is, let me see real quick, 14% of gross tuition and fees, and that is up from $123 million back in fiscal year 19, which was 10%. So they've almost doubled the amount of remissions, or often sometimes called institutional financial aid, that they're awarding students. So at the same time tuition is increasing, at the same time they're increasing the amount that they're using to remit or to offer, tuition discounts to students. So that just gives you a little more context.
And if I could, sorry, this is Ben, and I'm going to remain off camera here for a second, but would chime in the past, and it's been a while now, fortunately, since the commission dealt with an actual request for an approval greater than 5%. But this question about how increased tuition could be accompanied by increased tuition discounts or institutional aid was very important to the commission, and it actually weighed heavily on the commission's decisions to approve tuition increases greater than 5%. So I think it is a very important piece of the analysis that you don't see by design in this sort of assessment of whether or not a university is triggering the 5% increase. But Commissioner Heyman, you made the point very well. This is a this is a kind of high level view of what's happening to the student cost experience, and a deeper dive absolutely has to take into account university policies and practices with respect to discounts, institutional aid, whatever you want to call it. So, be assured that in the event that any of these universities did trigger the 5%, that would become an important, a very important part of the analysis for the commission.
Mr. Chairman, Ben,
Commissioner Devlin.
it would be very beneficial when we look in the future at remissions to see actual numbers and what the remissions are for. I mean, there are the things where there would be to allow a student that was needy to attend, but also, and I think this is a very good program, so I'm not criticizing it, the universities count the reduction in tuition under WICHE for out-of-state residents as a remission.
Commissioner Devlin, you raise a really good point, and Jim may comment on this as well. We are limited today in the amount, in the sort of specificity of the remission data that we receive from the universities. We're limited largely to what they are required to report publicly, and I believe federally. In the context of a request for commission of approval of a greater than 5% increase, I think the commission can kind of get whatever it wants in terms of details. It certainly can request whatever it wants, and I think can have a high expectation that those requests will be fulfilled by the universities. But we don't actually have a lot of visibility into institution remission policy, and frankly, and again, Jim may want to speak to this, and maybe I'll get myself in trouble for saying it, but I think that there's a fair amount of reticence on the part of the institutions, partly for competitive reasons or strategic reasons, from sharing some of that remission strategy publicly. But I think your larger point is absolutely, if we're gonna go down that path, then it's pretty important that we know something about how tuition discounts, tuition remissions are being used.
Yeah, that's a fair point, Ben. We don't have a lot of detail. I can tell you in last fiscal year, the universities collectively, they did collect just over $9 million from students for the Western Exchange, the WICHE program. So, and that's out of a total of $1.3 billion in tuition and fee revenue. So it's not, I think Commissioner Devlin is correct, but it's not a huge proportion, I would suspect, of their remissions. But yes, Ben is also correct. There are remissions for any number of reasons, and tuition and scholarship discounts awarded for different reasons. And of course, the number I gave you earlier, the $203 million in remissions, that also does not include all the privately funded scholarships, federal financial aid, state scholarships awarded, all that stuff as well. So that does not represent the totality of financial aid afforded to students, one very, very small piece of it. So.
Commissioner Rowe.
Sorry, one final comment. When you go up to maybe the 40,000 foot view, it seems to me the greatest progress we've seen in all of this in the last 5 or 6 years when I've been familiar with it is at least getting uniform data from the universities so we can do this level of analysis. And recognizing we'll never have complete transparency, it seems to me on our list going forward for future years, we really need to see how much we can push on transparency, because if we don't have even close to transparency into knowing the real cost after discount for the universities, then we don't even have to imagine what it's like for potential students. So I think the next step in overall progress is moving toward greater transparency. At the state level, the schools are close enough in tuition that I don't think and they share it with each other ultimately. So I don't think the competition would necessarily be prohibitive. So I think we just need to think about what additional data would be helpful to the state and to citizens, and see if we can't move in that direction.
Commissioner Rowe, I really appreciate that. And I think it's a continuation of a conversation we started earlier about wanting to better understand affordability, which we understand that tuition is a component of, but what we're really interested in is to what extent is affordability a barrier to student participation in higher education in Oregon, and that's going to take a more complicated look at. And I think this most recent conversation draws attention to another factor, which is the whole discounting remission issue as well. So appreciate that. Any other comments? I want to remind you that we do have a full commission meeting tomorrow, and I believe it starts at 9 a.m. For those who are able, this is as much as possible a face-to-face meeting. We're going to be focusing a lot on strategic planning. I don't know if Chair Rowe, if you want to add any comments, just to give us a trailer to tomorrow.
No, it will be fun. It will be fun, and it will be hard work. And thank you for bringing this one in on time. That's quite an achievement.
Well, I love the leader. That's going to be fun. So thank you so much for that. If there are no other comments, this meeting is adjourned. Thank all of you.
Thank you so much.
Guthrie, can you stay on for a moment?
Absolutely, Commissioner.